May 6, 2024, and we're glad you're here with us in chambers. My name is Vice Mayor Emily Beach. I'm honored to be chairing the meeting tonight. However, we are not missing our honorable mayor, Mayor Coulson. Donna Coulson is with us, but she is traveling this, and just for logistics purposes, it's easier to have somebody live in the room to manage the meeting, but Mayor Coulson will be fully participating with us online, as is noticed in the agenda. So I'm officially calling the meeting to order. Thank you for your patience. It is 7:05. We did have a in-depth study session with our Traffic Safety Parking Commission meeting, so thanks for your patience. Got ourselves in order. We are going to start with, as we do, with the Pledge Allegiance to the flag, and I would like to invite our newly soon-to-be sworn-in City Council member to lead us in the pledge.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. And we have a very heavy agenda tonight, but I'm delighted we get to start with such a happy occasion. So before we even do our official roll call, we are going to be officially swearing in the newest member of our city council, who is the District 1 interim city council member who was appointed at our last meeting when council member Ricardo Ortiz resigned with a little bit of time left in his term. And through a competitive process, Andrea Papajan was selected to earn this appointment, which will last from now until the November election. And we are delighted to welcome her, and we congratulate her with open arms to this position. And I understand you have a very special husband, Kamathi, who's going to be swearing you in tonight. Is that accurate? So please, why don't you approach the podium, and we will proceed with your official swearing in.
We'll share the mic. Okay, please raise your right hand. I, Andrea Papajan,
I, Andrea Papajan,
do solemnly swear
do solemnly swear
that I will support
that I will support
and defend
and defend
the Constitution of the United States
the Constitution of the United States
and the Constitution of the State of California
and the Constitution of the State of California
against all enemies,
against all enemies,
foreign and domestic,
foreign and domestic,
that I will bear truth,
that I will bear truth,
faith, and allegiance
faith, and allegiance
to the Constitution
to the Constitution
of the United States
of the United States
and the Constitution of the State of California,
and the Constitution of the State of California,
that I take this obligation
that I take this obligation
freely
freely
without any mental reservation
without any mental reservation
or purpose of evasion,
or purpose of evasion,
and that I will well
and that I will well
and faithfully discharge
and faithfully discharge
the duties
the duties
upon which I am about to enter.
upon which I am about to enter.
Congratulations.
So interim city council member Papajan, please join us here on the dais. Well, we welcome her to the team, and I just want to provide Mayor Coulson an opportunity if you would like to say anything to welcome our newest council member to the dais.
Thank you very much, Vice Mayor Beach. Yes, we welcome with enthusiasm our new colleague, and I also want to just say how much I appreciate Vice Mayor Beach managing the meeting, and we look forward to a collaborative and productive council running for the next rest of the year.
Thank you so much. Councilmember Papajan, would you like to say anything briefly?
No, I actually don't have any words.
All right.
Thank you.
We want, well,
Those who came and for all your support.
Absolutely. To see so many friends and smiling faces, it means a lot. This is significant public service you're embarking on, and we really appreciate you stepping up. And what a meeting to introduce you to life of City Council. And we appreciate everybody being here this evening as well. All right, without further ado, we are going to move along the agenda and begin with our roll call. So I'll turn it to our city clerk.
Councilmember Papajohn,
Here.
Councilmember Brownrigg,
Here.
Councilmember Stevenson,
Present.
Vice Mayor Beach,
Here.
Mayor Coulson.
Here.
All right, number 5, we do not have any requests for AB 2449 remote participation. We do have a duly noticed alternate location on our city council agenda. Item number 6, report out from closed session. There was no closed session, so Mr. City Attorney?
So there's no report out. Thank you.
No report out. Thank you. We do have a number of upcoming events we'd like to share with the community. I'll try to run through these as quickly as possible. On May 7th at 6:30 p.m. in the Lane Room of the library, Peninsula Clean Energy will be providing a presentation from their Director of Communications for the Building Decarbonization Coalition, discussing what electrification entails and why it's important to you and your home and how you can save money with rebates and incentives. So don't miss that on May 7th, 6:30 p.m. at the Lane Room. On May 9th, there's a senior field trip to the USS Potomac for those history buffs in the room. On May 10th, between 6 and 9 p.m. at the Burlingame Community Center, Kids Night Out. Sign up for kids and for parents. On May 17th at 6 p.m., there will be a sing-along to The Little Mermaid at the Burlingame Community Center. One terrific Disney movie with great sing-along songs. And on Sunday, May 19th at 10 a.m., you can sign up for a park-to-park family bike ride. Sign up through Parks and Recreation. Great way to see the community and build your confidence on much of our new bike infrastructure around town. On Tuesday, May 21st at 6:30 p.m. in the Lane Room, there will be a presentation on Asian American herbalism. Join author Aaron Masako as you sip tea and explore relationships to herbs, ancestral healing practices, and Asian American wellness culture. And finally, on Thursday, May 30th at 7 p.m., hosted by the Burlingame Historical Society, there will be a presentation on Ansell's Town of Easton. Come and explore the early town of Easton and Ansel M. Easton, who subdivided and promoted his parents' vast Blackhawk Ranch in North Burlingame, May 30th, 7 p.m. in the Lane Room. Colleagues, do we have any other community events to report? Seeing none, we will move on to presentations, of which we have 2 this evening. One recognizing May as Mental Health Month, and followed by another Public Works presentation. And following that opportunity, we will give the public an opportunity to make a public comment for items not on the agenda. So sit tight through our presentations, and we'll turn it over now to staff for recognizing May as Mental Health Month.
I have a proclamation for you.
Do we have any special guests in the audience who may be receiving this?
I believe so.
Oh, yay.
Please come forth to the podium. And we'll turn it over. Please introduce yourself and your organization, and then we'll say a few words.
All right. Well, thank you very much. My name is Robert Taylor. I'm the director at NAMI San Mateo County. Thank you very much for the proclamation. This is our 50th year serving San Mateo County. Actually, NAMI, the National Alliance on Mental Illness, was founded in the county 50 years ago, and eventually turned into the largest national grassroots mental health organization in the States. We're headquartered out of Virginia at this point, but very proud. We're all very proud that NAMI started here. And our mission is to provide mental health services, improve the mental health services available to all residents within San Mateo County through education, support programs, and advocacy. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Mr. Taylor. We really appreciate you being here, and we appreciate all that NAMI does for our cities, for our communities, for fellow nonprofits. I know we've crossed paths in that sector as well, and really appreciate your volunteers and your staff for the great training and awareness that that's providing. So tonight, Mayor Coulson has instructed us that we were going to proclaim and recognize May as Mental Health Awareness Month. There's a whole bunch of detailed clauses in here, but I'm just going to summarize because what's really important is that we recognize that 1 out of every 8 in San Mateo County adults likely has a serious psychological distress in the past year in 2021. And from 2019 through 2021, San Mateo County youth in grades 7 and 11 reported chronic sadness and hopelessness in the past 12 months. These problems face people and stigma related to mental health and substance use conditions make people feel isolated and alone. Many go years without receiving help, and if untreated, can shorten life expectancy. It crosses all demographics, all ages, all genders, all people. It affects everyone. There is huge stigma that we are trying to overcome, and these are treatable health conditions, and many people can recover and lead full and meaningful lives. So the San Mateo County Board of Supervisors is the first in the country to pass a resolution in January 2024 declaring loneliness as a public health crisis, pledging to promote social connection in our communities. Even though we're so connected through our devices and technology, nothing replaces human interaction. And so we're working not only with the county in collaboration, but certainly with San Mateo County Behavioral Health and Recovery Services, the Offices of Diversity and Equity and Inclusion on various health initiatives. And it's the City of Burlingame City Council's wishes to increase public knowledge of signs and symptoms of mental health and substance use conditions, professional and self-help resources, and self-care practices. And so we are declaring this through Mayor Donna Coulson. The City of Burlingame recognizes May 24 as Mental Health Awareness Month to enhance public awareness of mental health and help end the stigma and direct members of the community to resources and support for mental health and substance use conditions. Such an important thing, and the peer support that NAMI in particular provides through groups for anybody who may be suffering. It's important that we talk about certainly the mental health hotline 988, which can be called, and Star Vista staffs that 24/7, correct?
Yes.
For anybody, whether that's suicide prevention or loneliness, you can reach a trusted professional, but there's so many other resources. NAMI can provide support, and the community self-help groups and peer groups that NAMI provides in education services are amazing. So
One thing that I would just like to mention is, and thank you for the details you just shared, but one thing that we're very proud of at NAMI, and this is national, not only local, but national, but all of our programs and services are free. So it makes it, very accessible. And one thing that, we will serve approximately 6,700 individuals this year in San Mateo County. And with the special emphasis on youth and seniors, but just one stat that I wanted to share with you that sort of really kind of hits home and with me and our staff at NAMI San Mateo County is we're having a special emphasis on, as I mentioned, youth and seniors, but really focusing on youth. But 50% of youth have, by the age of 14, have a significant mental health event in their life. And then 75% by the age of 24 have a significant mental health issue in their life. So it really kind of goes to the point of why mental health services are so needed for the population as a whole. But if we're able to really impact the youth before early 20s, we're looking at the possibility of NAMI and, all the other mental health institutions, organizations, Star Vista, go down California Clubhouse, the Go Down the Works, Safe Space. We really have an opportunity to make a huge difference in the lives of folks moving forward if we can catch it early enough. So, but thank you for making May a special month and recognizing mental health as a priority. So thank you.
thank you. Colleagues, any comments? Mayor Coulson, go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you, NAMI, for coming today. Executive Director, appreciate you. I also just want to call out that the Heffernan family is who helped organize this on behalf of NAMI. Their daughter Olivia works with you, I believe.
Yes.
And they're just an amazing local Burlingame family that has extensively supported NAMI, and they were the ones who suggested and recognized the 50-year anniversary and allowed us to collaborate. So just wanted to acknowledge them and thank them.
Wonderful. Yeah, no, the Heffernans are outstanding, and Deb and Doug are huge supporters. And Olivia has, I'm lucky enough to work with Olivia, and she's outstanding. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Taylor. And even the Surgeon General has called this out, what you mentioned, the youth mental health crisis in this country. It's something we all need to pay attention to. Anybody who has an opportunity to take mental health first aid training, which the county has funded, and there's lots of opportunities. I've had the opportunity myself. It's a great program, well worth doing. So NAMI, happy birthday. Thank you so much for all the work you do in the community. And we're pleased to declare this Mental Health Awareness Month.
Thank you so much. Appreciate the time.
Thank you. Thank you. All right, we have a second presentation tonight from the American Public Works Association accreditation presentation.
Good evening, Council. My name is Jubin Pakpor. I represent the 5,000 public works professionals in California, Hawaii, and Nevada. And I'm a volunteer. This is not my day job, but I advocate for public works. And honestly, one of the favorite things that I get to do is something like this. This is extra special because I actually grew up in San Mateo, and out of all my travels, this was the shortest commute. So this is great. I started out I'm joined here by Sean Rose from the local chapter, Silicon Valley chapter. I wanted to mention Sean. I started out my public works career 25 years ago at Contra Costa County. And the question then is a question now for elected officials, in that, is your public works department doing a good job? You all know as elected officials when they're not doing a good job, right? Citizens call. There's water leaks, roads are potholed, citizens can't get to schools to drop off their kids. The fire department can't access fire hydrants. After storms, the storm drains back up. So as elected officials, you know when things are going bad. But usually when things are going good in public works, no one calls, right? That's when you know things are going well. And so how do you know if your department is doing good or if they're doing exceptional, right? That's that extra level. Well, I'm here to tell you that they're doing amazing. And let me tell you why. They applied for an accreditation process through the American Public Works Association. I represent Region 8, again, Nevada, California, and Hawaii. It's a 35,000 member public works association spanning all of the United States and Canada. And this accreditation process is very, very rigorous. And it includes, it's not a self-assessment, it's not check boxes. We actually send folks in here to look at your processes, look at your standard operating practices. And it took 4 years for this process to go through for this accreditation. I'm proud to say that City of Burlingame now is the 17th agency in California to become achieve accreditation. Hundreds apply for this accreditation. There's only 17 in California that have achieved it. And so it's an amazing feat. And they achieved it by reaching 99% compliance with all the 400, I'm sorry, I don't have my glasses, so let me try this, 421 practices that were looked at. So out of that 421 practices, and there's sub-practices and there's sub-practices to that, and they achieved 99%, which is one of the highest marks I've seen. It's an amazing feat. And lastly, I want to say that we actually saw some standard operating procedures that we're going to now share. We're going to take what the City of Burlingame is doing with their permission and share that with other agencies. They were that good. They're going to become sort of the model that we're going to share. If someone wants something, we're going to share what you're doing here with the city of Burlingame. So it's with tremendous honor that I'm here to present with your director Mortuza and your deputy director Heathcote this amazing honor and congratulate you, council, and Public Works Department with this accreditation.
I think it'd be great if all the public works staff could come on up and we can get a nice photo.
Wow, wow, wow. I think there's 482 cities in the state of California, Director Matuza, is that correct? And we're one of 17 that have this accredited.
And one of 218 in the entire United States.
Isn't that amazing? Well, we'll celebrate that in a minute. Let's make sure you guys get a picture first, so. I'm so glad you brought your entire team here, or at least whoever could attend, because it is a team effort.
You should join them, sir.
You guys can come up here if you need to.
Jubin, you want to come? Right here. Thank you.
Wow. Can we give them a round? of applause? Director Matuza, would you like to say a few words, and Mr. Heathcote before the council says a few words, but please go ahead first.
Just like to make some brief remarks. This is an amazing, amazing moment for our public works staff to celebrate this tremendous accomplishment. On behalf of our entire team, I want to express our sincere thanks to Jubin Pakpur, District 8 Director, and also Sean Rose, who served as Public Works Director in Woodside until a few years ago. This is the highest honor and mark of professionalism and excellence in our field in public works. Any public works department can achieve. This achievement is not an easy feat. It requires comprehensive assessment, review of all policies, operational procedures, practices, and the most rigorous national standards. This process challenged us to continually improve what we do and optimize our plans, develop and maintain manager practices for infrastructure maintenance. And this would not be possible without our excellent public works team. I want to first have Lily Cifuentes be recognized here. She led the entire process for the team. It's a 4-year process, and she is a manager of the managers, made sure all the managers do their job. So she actually led this entire process. A big I want to thank Art Morimoto, Assistant Director Art Morimoto, Deputy Director Mike Heathcote, Water Division Manager Mike Heathcote, Tim McCullough, Street Storm and Street Storm and Sewer Manager Rick Horn. Here, Johnson Wu. Where is Johnson? He's missing. Okay. Fleet and Facilities Manager, and then senior engineers, starting Kevin Okada, Mahesh Yadluri, Andy Wong, Martin Wong, and Andrew Yang. I don't see Andrew here, but there you are. Thank you. So these individuals, they worked night and day, hundreds and hundreds of hours to make sure that our practices are up to date, and also we are one of the best. And the practice that was considered to be model practice for the nation is how we make sure that sewer overflows do not occur in the city is one of the model practices in the nation. So that's what being recognized. Again, this is we are not stopping here. This will give us a chance to continually improve, and this would not be possible without the leadership of our city manager and her support and council support for us to do what we do every day. And thank you very much. And last but not least, I want to thank our city attorney's office. They have been very helpful. Maria Trezeguet, and she has been amazing with dealing with the process. And also Helen Uscott, our finance director, she's been very helpful as well. Again, in this process, it was not just the Public Works Department, but all other departments actually participated because there's a lot of back and forth. As each there's a gatekeeper function, there is a checks and balances. All of that has to occur in order for Public Works to be doing what we are doing. Again, thank you very much.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. I was going to touch on what he said there. Although this is an award for Public Works, it's really the city of Burlingame. This process really showed how much that we don't work in silos. There was full chapters on human resources, full chapters on finance, city attorneys, the planning department, how your zoning in the city works, and how that plays into your public works and your capital improvement projects. So it was really an example of how we're one department, but we all work together as a city. Everybody played a big piece, lots of meetings and follow-up meetings. But everybody, as Syed has mentioned, put in a lot of work to it. Again, I'm going to reiterate Lily's participation in this. We started 4 years ago. We got this whole worksheet of here's all these things you're going to document and tell us how you do it. Very overwhelming. COVID hit. We thought, oh, we're going to have all this extra time to work on this now. That didn't happen. It kind of kept rolling along. I came into this position, worked on a little bit more. And then with Lily's assistance really is what got us over that, got the gorilla off the back, got us to the finish line, which was still a marathon to go. But huge thanks to her and the whole team that put this together. Thank you all.
Thank you much. Well, colleagues, what can we say? Would any of you like to just comment? Madam Mayor? No? Go ahead, Councilmember Brown.
I'll go
No, you
ahead.
go ahead. Oh.
Go ahead, Michael.
Okay, thank you, Madam Mayor and Madam Vice Mayor. I'll go first. I don't think I'll be last. Yes, it's a whole city and it's a great city because so often you see examples of everyone working together, but this really is a testament to Public Works. And forgive me, I forgot the award giver's name, but the gentleman who said when things go wrong, you hear about it in a hurry. It's certainly true for Public Works. And, we all have been here long enough to know that it's Public Works who shows up in the middle of the night when the pump station doesn't work. It's Public Works who finds the wedding ring in the sewer and returns it to the, to the homeowner. It is making sure that, little Burlingame with 30,000 people plus is running a $350 million capital project. Oh, but wait, not just that. We're also working on a $160 million project on El Camino. I mean, it is incredible. I think often we like to say that Burlingame punches above its weight. You're like 2 or 3 weight classes higher than where you should be. So congratulations, Syed, and to the entire crew, both those of you who are here. Thank you for being here and for all the team in the field.
Awesome. Thank you, Councilmember Brownrigg. Yes, Councilmember Stevenson.
Thank you, Madam Vice Mayor. I wish everybody in Burlingame could go on a tour of what Public Works does. Because like you said, nobody calls when things are working. The lights goes on, the water comes out of the sink, the sewer drains out cleanly. It is not top of mind for most residents. But when it goes wrong, then you hear about it and there's this amazing response, no matter what time of the day. So I got the good fortune of being able to go on a tour, not just of the water system, but also other aspects of what Public Works does. And I just wish all residents had that opportunity. I'm not suggesting that we start a tour business on this, but the education gives you perspective on how amazing our Public Works Department is and how complicated it is to function so smoothly day in and day out. So Syed and the entire team, congratulations. It's well deserved.
Yes, sir.
Thank you. Papa John.
Bye.
No, you're good.
Okay. I just heartfelt congratulations on this just amazing award. I just want to acknowledge the leadership, so excellent in Public Works, and every individual, contributes. I worked with many of you, and I just am really proud of Public Works and all the great work that you do. Thank you.
Thanks, Councilmember Papa John. Madam Mayor, go ahead.
Thank you. I also just want to acknowledge staff and thank everyone for the hard work on this project. It was an incredible surprise. And I also want to say it gives me the confidence that we can execute these very complex projects. The Vice Mayor alluded to them, both El Camino Real and Councilman Brownrigg as well, and the grade separation, among other things. And I also want to acknowledge the California Drive project, which recently received an award for one of the best Bay Area bike pedestrian safety plans of a street in any city. And I know that sometimes the work we do can have consequential commentary from the public, but as the peers and professionals review it, I think it shows that the work that the Public Works is doing is on the right track and is deserving of incredible recognition. And I want to thank you. As this little city grows, you are going to be critical to our success.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, for your comments. So I guess just to wrap this up, Mr. Pakpor, Mr. Rose, thank you so much. You honored us with your presence here tonight as a peer to come this way and present the award to our team. That really means a lot. To staff, Public Works staff, you honor us with your presence and your work every day. Thank you for the work on behalf of the people of Burlingame. I go back to 482 cities in the state of California, and that doesn't even count all the ones in the region, but we're 17. One of 17 to have this accreditation. 4 years in the working, it's amazing. And I wonder if it even began to quantify that intangible of customer service that we hear about when our neighbors have to call Public Works in the middle of the night for something and they say, they were amazing. I know them by name and they're awesome. And that means the world to us. So thank you all for the work you do day in and day out. It's a team effort. That is true, Director Martuza, but every team needs a leader. So I just want to give a standing O to Director of Public Works. How many years have you worked here, Syed? 26 years. Thank you, Director Martuza, for your All right, with that, we are moving on to item 9, which is public comments for non-agenda items. So if there's any members of the public here tonight that would like to come before City Council and speak anything that's on your mind, you have 3 minutes to do so. If it is not agendized on this paper, under California law, we cannot respond to you. So we cannot make a comment back. We will just say thank you and we will follow up with staff. If you are here for agenda items that are upcoming, for example, shortly we will be discussing the Planning Commission's approval, right, of an appeal, an application. There will be time to talk about that item coming up. There's also a few other items that are agendized, but this is a time when the public may approach City Council for items that are not on the agenda. Okay, so with that, do we have any members that have put in a card? Thank you. If you're comfortable introducing yourself, you have 3 minutes to speak.
Yeah, my name is Al Mazzoni, and I'm a resident for many, many, many years here. And I was a merchant on Burlingame Avenue for almost 30 years. And I've noticed that in the last few years, the traffic control is not very good anymore. And I'm wondering if we can have more representation on the street, parking enforcement, and maybe even police presence, patrolling or walking. It would be a big help for the merchants and for the residents, because it's really getting a little bit of out of hand. The parking spaces, I counted right behind the Van Shoe Store and Grapevine. There's a parking lot there. And there were 8 cars just for DoorDash parked there. And they were parked there for like 2 hours. And they're taking up the spaces. They just double park, put their blinkers on. They go into places to get merchandise. Anyway, that's the whole thing. That's all I wanted to bring up. And I wanted to, to agree with you. We have the best guys taking care of our public utilities here. I mean, they're really good. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Mazzoni. We appreciate you being with us tonight. We took notes and we will consider that for future items. Is there any other member of the public that wishes to speak on an item not on the agenda? Anybody online, Madam City Clerk?
We don't do that.
Oh, we don't do that anymore? Okay.
I don't have any.
No emails written in on other things? Okay. Then we are going to move on to item 10, which is an approval of our consent calendar. We have a lot of items A through item E. Is there any item my colleagues wish to pull from the consent calendar for separate consideration?
Briefly,
Yes,
briefly, item L.
item L.
And L.
Thank you. 10L
Yeah, thank you.
is requested to be pulled. And any other items, colleagues? Madam Mayor, I don't see you raising your hand. Madam City Clerk, are there any items that the public wishes to pull?
No.
Okay, so shall we take, would anybody like to,
I think you need to recuse
oh,
on minutes related to DIVCO, right? Didn't we discuss that?
oh, the minutes. Now, when it comes to minutes, though, I can,
You just don't vote on those. So maybe we take those separately.
thank you. Do I need to leave the room for that? Okay, so
Want a separate one?
That would be 10.
10B, thank you for that.
Okay.
Okay,
I
so,
recuse myself from I'm sorry, Madam,
yes, go ahead.
excuse myself from voting on the minutes as well, just because I wasn't
It-
part of the council.
Believe it is not
Yes.
required to do that.
That's correct. You probably should, because you were not participating
Yeah.
in those meetings.
So it's 10A through 10C.
So why don't we pull all the minutes and and 10L, and you can do
Okay.
balance, and then we'll go one at a time on the others.
Okay,
So I'll make a motion, Madam Vice Chair, Vice Mayor, sorry, on items E, F, G, H, I, J, K, M, N, O, and P.
Can we do
and item D?
Yeah.
Well,
D, sorry.
and D, I think so. We captured all of them now. Okay.
Second.
We have a motion from Councilmember Stevenson, a second from Councilmember Brownrigg. Let's take a roll call vote.
Councilmember Papajohn,
Yes.
Councilmember Brownrigg,
Yes.
Councilmember Stevenson,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Beach.
Yes.
Mayor Coulson.
Yes.
Okay, the motion carries unanimously.
Madam Mayor, if I may, I'd like to make a motion to approve item 10A.
Item 10A, approval of the city council meeting minutes.
Mr. Attorney, I can't do all 3 minutes at once.
No.
You should do them one at a time.
Okay, I make a motion to approve item 10A.
And since we are pulling this, do we have to pull it and ask if there's public comment on this
Yes.
item?
Yes, you-
Okay. So do we have any members of the public that wish to speak on item 10A? Seeing none. Okay, we have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second from Stevenson, motion by Brownrigg, roll call vote.
Councilmember Brownrigg,
Yes.
Councilmember Stevenson,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Beach.
Yes,
Mayor Coulson.
Yes.
item passes 4-0. And then does that considered abstained?
Extension.
Do we have an abstention?
Yes.
Okay. And one abstention. Okay. Any other motions we would like to entertain?
I'd like to make a motion to approve item 10B.
Thank you. Do we have any members of the public who wish to speak on item 10B? Seeing none, do we have a second?
Second.
Stevenson. Roll call vote.
Councilmember Brownrigg,
Yes.
Councilmember Stevenson,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Beach, I believe you're recusing from 10, because it's DIVCO.
I recuse. Yes.
Mayor Coulson.
Yes.
So that'll,
And I abstain.
yes.
And we have an abstain. Okay. Track that, Madam City Clerk. This is serious procedure here, gang. You're witnessing some complicated legislation. Okay, item 10C. Do we have a motion? Maybe Councilmember Papajohn, would you like to make a motion? Oh, no, you can't do that one. Sorry, Councilmember.
I'll make a motion to approve item 10C.
Thank you. Do we have a second?
Second.
From Brownrigg. Do we have any members of the public who wish to comment on item 10C? Seeing none, we'll take a roll call vote.
Councilmember Brownrigg,
Yes.
Councilmember Stevenson,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Beach,
Yes.
Mayor Coulson,
Yes.
and one abstain from Papa John.
Motion passes 4-0 with one abstention. All right, we have moved on from there. We do have one item, 10L. Is that correct?
Yes.
Councilmember Brownrigg, go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Vice Mayor. So this briefly is part of an ongoing diligence project that our working group on City Hall has undertaken, and I'm in full support of the initiative to recruit an advisor for real estate. I was a little concerned by the way it was titled, that it made it sound like it was sort of a done deal, like we're just going to get a broker and then we'll have a new City Hall. So that's not what's going on. And in addition, I might add that I think as a city, I think we are very, very aware of the deficiencies of this building, especially from an office and use point of view. I personally think we should do a better job communicating that to the public. And so I wanted to pull this item, not because I'm in any way opposed to it, but rather because I think we have to start doing a bit of a better job engaging the public in these challenges so that if there is a solution that appears, it doesn't come as a surprise to the public, which I don't think would land well. And that's really what I wanted to comment on, Madam Vice Mayor.
If I may.
Yes, Madam.
We met with CBRE today and we talked about outreach. So that is part of the plan.
Great.
So we haven't launched it yet, but before anybody, with the exception of this contract, before we dot any I's or cross any T's or make any decisions, we'll be doing outreach so that folks know what we're up to. We're not there yet.
Thank you, Madam City Manager.
Thank you. I see Mayor Coulson has her hand up, and as a member of the subcommittee on City Hall, correct, Madam Mayor?
Yes.
Go ahead.
Thank you. Just two things. I think you could notice from the contract, the way it's organized, it's really a pay upon services situation. So we don't exactly know what it will be down the road. But I also want to point out that we're making a change on the subcommittee. So Councilman Brownrigg is going to step down and Councilman Peterson is going to step into that role, really just to try to balance everyone's workload. That was really it. So just want to acknowledge that it's a different agenda item where we're restructuring to accommodate our new councilwoman, Andrea Papajohn, and add her in, and just trying to keep everybody's load manageable. And I want to thank Councilman Peterson for stepping up to do that heavy work.
Thank you.
Talk to him, we'll let you know.
All right. Thank you, Councilmember Stevenson. Appreciate that. Any other comments or questions from colleagues? Then we'll open it up to members of the public who may wish to speak on item 10L. Seeing none, would anybody like to make a motion?
I'm pleased to make a motion to adopt the resolution authorizing the city manager to execute the agreement as described.
Thank you, Councilmember Brownrigg. Do we have a second?
I'm happy to second.
Thank you, Councilmember Papajohn. We'll take a roll call vote.
Councilmember Papa John,
Yes.
Councilmember Brownrigg,
Yes.
Councilmember Stevenson,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Beach.
Yes.
Mayor Coulson.
Yes.
All right, motion passes unanimously. Thank you. And now we are moving on to the more substantive portion of our agenda tonight with public hearings that involve public comment. We're going to switch gears onto item number 11A, which is consideration of appeal of the Planning Commission's approval of an application for design review and fence variance for a new two-story single-unit dwelling and attached garage on a lot containing an existing single-unit dwelling to remain at 900 Paloma Avenue. Before we get started, let me just transfer some paperwork here. I want to thank many of you for attending tonight. What we are about to do here is embark on really a judicial hearing. The city, your city council is sort of all three branches of government for us here in local government, but we don't often play a judiciary role. But tonight, that is what we're doing. So we have some very strict rules of the road and procedures that we have to follow in order to make sure that this is a fair hearing and everybody is included. So I'm going to lay out sort of the rules of the road and how we're going to go about this hearing. This is an appeal. A concerned group of citizens are concerned with a decision that was made at the Planning Commission. We are going to discuss whether or not, in a moment, I'm going to ask colleagues if anybody had any ex parte communications involved, which means, have you discussed this outside of this legislative hearing? And then we're going to go right into the order of operations. So here is how the procedure will take place. First, we will have a staff presentation of the situation and the appeal. Council will have the opportunity to ask questions of staff. Then we will move into the appellant presentation, which will last a total of 10 minutes. And the timelines are very strict. Everybody's been noticed about these in advance. The appellants will have 10 minutes. It doesn't matter if you nominate one person to speak on your behalf or 10 people to speak on your behalf. When 10 minutes is up, the clock will buzz and I will have to gavel you down. This is not mean to be disrespectful of anybody. I'm going to treat everybody equally. But in 10 minutes, the appellants will cease. Council will have the opportunity to ask questions of the appellant, any kind of clarifying questions. And then we'll move on to the third section where the respondent will have 10 minutes to complete their presentation about the application to the Planning Commission. After 10 minutes, whether or not it's one person presenting or 10 people, each getting a minute, the clock will buzz, I'll gavel you down, and then council will have the opportunity to ask clarifying questions for the respondent. At that point, we will open this conversation up to public comment. If you have not spoken yet, you will have the opportunity to come to the podium and we'll have 3 minutes. Everybody will have 3 minutes to say their piece. After 3 minutes, I will ask you to wrap up and move on so we treat everybody fairly. And then finally, the appellant who began this process will have the opportunity to have a rebuttal for a total of 5 minutes. The appellant gets the last word because they put the financial wherewithal and they started this process to have the last word, 5 minutes. And then there will be an opportunity for council alone to deliberate, discuss, and then conduct a vote. So I hope that's pretty clear. And again, I'm going to run a pretty tight ship here tonight. And again, it's just to make sure that everybody gets due process and has a fair hearing. So before I turn it over to staff, I'm going to ask colleagues, were there any other ex parte communications we have to disclose, visits with neighbors or other colleagues that we should discuss?
I want to share, Madam Mayor, that like all of us, probably I read every single email, but I had never met with anybody.
Thank you, Councilmember Brownrigg.
Similarly, read every email. I did a site visit just on the street level, but that's it.
Thank you so much. Councilmember Papajohn?
No ex parte conversations, just internal.
Thank you. And I know the area very well, so I'm very familiar with the neighborhood with a drive-by as well.
Mayor Colson with our.
And Mayor Colson, do you have any to disclose?
Yes, so I too have read all of the correspondence. I have also in the past visited the site when it was actually for sale years ago. So I'm pretty familiar with it. And I spoke to Michael Barber, who I believe is taking the lead today. And I also had several conversations with Len Matterman, who is our CEO for One Shoreline, which is the San Mateo County Flood and Sea Level Rise Resiliency District.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and thanks for your due diligence and for your leadership and service on in so much sea level rise issues for us. Okay, so as we begin, the last thing I'll say is always so proud of Burlingame, not only our council, but our constituents. We know this is going to be a very thoughtful and respectful public hearing. Tensions may run high, people feel strongly, but I know that we always treat each other with respect in these chambers. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to staff for the staff report. Thank you. Director Gardner.
Thank you, Vice Mayor Beach, Mayor Colson, members of the council, and welcome Councilmember Papajohn. I just want to say as an aside, I had the privilege of working with Ms. Papajohn on the city's first sea level rise study. We had our ESA consultants to help us just do the very preliminary, where do we start kind of study, and it was really great. That's really laid the groundwork for all the great work that we've done since then. So. But tonight we're here to discuss an appeal of a planning commission decision for an application at 900 Paloma Avenue. The staff report and also this presentation is meant to address concerns that have come up through the process, and we do take them seriously. And I want to talk about them in a way that shows respect to the neighbors' concerns and also to the process of development review here in Burlingame. Next, please. Here is the site. It's an unusual, both in shape and size. It's more than 12,000 square feet in a neighborhood where the typical lot sizes are anywhere 5,000, 6,000, 7,000 square feet. So it is a little larger and unusually shaped. Next, please. So this is going to be hard to see, but I'll just describe, and there are plans that were delivered and also available online. The front of the property has an existing single-story home that was retained but remodeled. It has now more contemporary, updated look to it. To the rear would be a new second home. This is an R2 zoning district, which is sometimes called either a duplex district or two-unit district. So two homes on a property are within the parameters of the zoning and the general plan. There's also two accessory dwelling units, or ADUs, and those are allowed under state law. Those are a little different in that they're not subject to review by either the planning commission or the city council. They're not discretionary. They are reviewed by staff, and staff does review those, check against the adopted accessory dwelling unit standards that the city has adopted to ensure that those structures are compliant. Next, please. This shows a landscape plan, and again, it's kind of hard to see, but the point is just to show there is a combination that I think the applicant can probably expand on this more, but a series of different landscape treatments, particularly around the edges in respect to neighboring properties. You'll notice that there is a fence variance application, and that also, to my understanding, is in response to neighborhood desires to have taller fences, particularly given the elevated height of the structures that will be required as they are in the floodplain. Next, please. And then these are some renderings provided by the applicant. So in the very lower right-hand corner, you can see that's the existing home on the site. And you can see it has this sort of traditional massing, but has been refurbished with a more contemporary look to it. And then the other views show the other structures proposed for the site, including the main second house, as well as the accessory dwelling units. One thing I think is noteworthy and was a condition of approval from the Planning Commission, they actually liked the architectural treatment of the ADUs a little better than the main house and asked for some of those trim details to be carried over to the main house so that it has a little more consistent look. Next. And then this is the development standards table. There was originally another proposal, which we're not discussing tonight because it didn't last long. It was to raise the entire site up to the base flood elevation. That was not desirable for a number of reasons, not particularly because of the urban design, but also just it wasn't going to work as well as the proposal that was ultimately approved. But what this shows are the various zoning standards that apply to this property, everything from the setbacks to the lot coverage. In the R2 zone, there is not a floor area ratio unlike the R1 single-family districts, but there is a lot coverage and a building height. So that's pretty much what regulates the mass on the site. Ultimately, the Planning Commission's job is quasi-judicial. They are looking at applications to see if the application is consistent with the general plan and with the zoning that have been adopted by the city. And the Planning Commission did spend a lot of time on this project. There was a lengthy discussion. We had members of the Public Works staff here to provide some of the technical information on stormwater and drainage. We also had input from the building division on the nature of the raised structures and how they work with flood requirements and the California Building Code. And there was a lot of technical discussion. A number of our commissioners are in the trades, either as architects or contractors, and they really did get into the nuts and bolts, so to speak, of the development proposal, and ultimately felt that they could support it based on the facts that were presented to them, as well as the project being consistent with the zoning and the general plan. Next, please. Probably the biggest topic of discussion and concern and also focus has been that this site is within what's known as Zone AH. It's one of the flood zones here in Burlingame that's mapped by FEMA, Federal Emergency Management Authority. And you can see it covers swaths of Paloma Avenue, Chula Vista, Laguna, California Drive, Edge Hill Drive. And you can see the geographical extent that you can imagine this was a lower lying area and more of a wetland or subject to, it's really the remnants of what had been a creek system and is therefore subject to flooding more than other portions of the community, particularly for 10-year events. Next, please. So this is, again, very hard to see, but it's in the plan set. This is a topographical survey of the site as it exists now. So you can see the house in the front, and then in the back, it's essentially unimproved. There's a patio, so that oval there is part of a landscape design. It has not been improved with drainage, particularly in the back. So this is a low-lying area, and our understanding from communicating with the neighbors is it is subject to pooling and to flooding, and it has not had the benefit of a properly engineered or designed drainage system. So it's become a sort of local nuisance over the years, just because it does tend to hold water, and that water will then spill onto neighboring properties. Next, please. So what do you do when you're in a flood zone? And the first thing I know what I thought of, and I think what a lot of us think of, are structures that we've seen either on the beach or basically raised up on stilts. These are homes that are in Stinson Beach, but we can also think of examples that are probably even higher up off the ground in the Gulf Coast or the Carolinas or what have you, particularly areas where there's a lot of hurricanes or big storms. So the purpose of these houses being on pilings or stilts, first of all, is to raise them to the base flood elevation. So in this case, it's probably 6 or 8 feet above grade. The point of the stilts is not to have water running underneath the house. It is to protect the house when it gets hit by waves so that it doesn't fall off of its foundation. So if it had a regular foundation and you have a lot of wave action hitting that base, it could topple the base and then the house would fail. So with these pilings, these are, pretty hardcore structural elements. In California, they also have to be designed to withstand earthquakes. So you've got a lot of factors to consider. But the point of it is that they are subject to wave action, and that is a force, and that's why they're looking the way they do. Next, please. In the absence of wave actions, so there's really kinds of 2 different types of protection for flooding. One is where there are wave actions, whether it's on the coast or a river. In areas where the flooding is from stormwater, and particularly in this case, it's stormwater coming down from the hills, coming from every which direction, you don't have the wave action. You do have the flooding, but it's not moving at the same kind of velocity. that you would have on the beach. So this is an example, and the staff report includes a number of examples of homes in the same flood zone. They're all within walking distance of the subject property, and they are raised at different heights depending on what the existing elevation is and then what the base flood elevation is. So this house you can see is only raised a foot or two. If you go to the next slide, please. But then the way, instead of it being on stilts, it has, these are called flood vents. And this is what you will see in other parts of the country or other parts of the state and even other parts of the world. In situations like this where the flooding is coming from stormwater as opposed to wave action. And the point of these, first of all, they need to be, there's standards and formulas for the sizing and the placement. At the very least, they need to be on two sides of the building. They need to be located within 12 inches of the ground so that as water starts to come up, the water can then enter and then find its way out the other side. Again, the point is not to allow water to just go through. The point is to protect the structure from failing. So if these vents were not there, you would have water starting to accumulate along the base of the building. It would create pressure inwards, and then that crawl space would fail. It's sort of a soft story, so to speak. So the point of the flood vents is to allow the water to go through, protect the integrity of that crawl space so that the structure does not fail. Next, please. This is another house on Laguna Avenue. This is probably the highest rise of all of the ones out there. So presumably this is a lower spot in the topography. This one's raised probably 5 or so feet. If you go to the next slide, please. This also has the flood vents. In this case, there's some vegetation. Ideally, you would not have vegetation. Because the flood vents are there to protect the integrity of the house, it's in the interest to keep them maintained, because if they get blocked or clogged and then there is a flood, you're losing the benefit, and then all of a sudden you're starting to threaten the structure of the house and risk some collapse. So it's important that they be maintained, and this one also you can see is sized much larger than the ones in the first example. Next, please. So back to this, and what you can't see, but maybe you can just barely read in all of these notes on the side, it says stormwater checklist notes. There are a lot of provisions that have been designed into this project which comply with the stormwater requirements, whether they be the City of Burlingame, FEMA, California Building Code. So many, in fact, if you go to the next page, it takes 2 pages. This page shows the permeable paver detail, and those also have to be designed in such a way that they properly drain. They're not just decorative, they do look nice, but they do have to have the right kind of under foundation so that the water does drain through. And there in the lower left-hand corner is an impervious surface calculation. And that is a concern that we've heard and is important to all projects, but particularly the ones in these flood zones, is that there has to be adequate impervious surface to handle the day-to-day stormwater retention and stormwater requirements. And then next page, please. To design for more flood events, here's some more details, and this includes both underground retention tanks as well as trenches. And then also during construction, there's the hay bales, which are meant to prevent stormwater runoff during construction before there's been the benefit of installing all of this infrastructure. Next, please. So a couple of things. Staff takes this very seriously. We've spent a lot of time on this internally and trying to review the plans, make sure that they address the concerns and the obligations of the city as well as the neighbors, their concerns. And I want to mention, that staff looks at, particularly as plans get to the building permit phase, they look at this very rigorously. We just saw our Public Works Department. You've got the full force of particularly the engineering division reviewing these with their civil engineer expertise. And it's not every city that gets that award. There's only 17 in the state. So I can say with a lot of confidence that our Public Works folks take the responsibility very seriously, and the same with our building division. I believe our building official may be online watching. He wanted to watch and be available if there's any questions. And the same, sometimes we hear from applicants saying, why are we being so difficult on their building permits? Why are we such sticklers? And it's important, so we are. We suffer the details, sweat the details, make sure everything's done correctly, and particularly for something where stormwater is important, flooding is a factor. This is something we do take very seriously. So I want to convey that. I hope I've represented that properly in the staff report, as well as this presentation, but also can speak on behalf of my colleagues. With that, we do have a couple of requests for accommodations. Mr. Barber will be speaking for the appellant. We would ask that he be able to sit at desk 8 here as an accommodation. And then the other is we did get some photos from one of the appellants late in the day, and I did not have a chance to give them to the city clerk, so I've printed them out as hard copies. I have enough copies for everybody if we can pass those around, and I expect Mr. Friedman may be mentioning those in his remarks, so wanted to make sure he had the benefit of that.
Thank you. Before we go further, thank you, Mr. Gardner, for your presentation. I want to make sure the council has an opportunity to ask questions of you,
Sure.
of staff first. So colleagues, do we have anyone with questions? And we are going to make extra careful to refrain from offering any opinion whatsoever or anything that could possibly be construed as an opinion until we hear from everybody here tonight. So any questions?
I have two, Matt.
Yes, go ahead. Councilmember Brownrigg.
Mayor, thank you very much. One question, I just want to affirm that the city of Burlingame's development rules for any project anywhere in the city is that you must manage stormwater on your site. You are not allowed to, under our rules, shed that water elsewhere. Am I right about that?
That is correct.
Except to, of course, into the gutters and storm drain and that sort of thing. But
Right, and we do have Public Works staff, if you have additional questions that can articulate or expand on that further. Because yeah, we do want stormwater retained on site as well. We don't want to just have everything drain off and go right into the gutter. So there is an obligation to manage that stormwater on site.
right. And not just something we want to do, something we require.
It's required, and so citywide it's required. There's an additional onerous in the FEMA flood zone that each year we get audited, and managing the Martin Kwan, who is our senior civil engineer, he is the floodplain manager, and he oversees compliance with the requirements. Should the city approve any projects that are not consistent with the FEMA requirements, we can lose our accreditation, and that's a big deal. So we take that very seriously, and we have had other projects that have said, "Oh, come on, let's just do this or that or the other," and say, "No, you've got to adhere to these standards," and it's something we're obligated to, and it's important.
Thank you. And then my second question is, in looking at the dry well design, I noticed that the requirement is that the base of the dry well must be at least 5 feet above seasonal high groundwater. And I wonder, how do we determine seasonal high groundwater?
That I may need to defer to my Public Works colleagues, as that's a question we typically would ask for them.
Thank you.
The seasonal high water is essentially the groundwater table, and that is based on what we know on an average basis in the area. Generally, it depends on the local location. It's 5 to 6 feet below the ground in the flat area. That's more or less in the flats near Californian Drive.
So is it correct, and I've never confronted this before, is it correct to assume that we would do a drilling to determine where seasonal high groundwater is on the site?
That's one way to do it.
Okay, and we do that, or the applicant does that, or
The project does that, yeah.
the project? Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Brownrigg. Any other questions for staff?
Wanted a little bit more clarification on the impervious level, a layer and the purpose of that.
So the purpose of particularly the impervious, whether it's paving or what have you, it is a calculation. And the point is that the site is expected and required to manage its stormwater on site. So rather than have a fully paved site where everything just kind of flows down into the gutter and into the storm sewer, it is meant to have a certain percentage of the site so that the water can soak down into the ground, whether that's through a lawn, whether it's a planted area, whether it's permeable paving, it's a combination of all of it. And that's part of the strategy to ensure that a certain amount of stormwater is managed on site. It lessens the burden on the infrastructure system and the storm sewer system if sites can manage a portion of their stormwater on site.
Colleagues, any other questions? No? Madam Mayor, seeing none? All right. Well, with that, we have concluded the staff presentation and council questions for staff. We are now going to begin the section where we hear from the appellant first for 10 minutes. And I understand Mr. Michael Barber will be speaking on behalf of the appellant. You'll have 10 minutes when I strike the gavel down, and then we'll have an opportunity for council to ask questions of the appellant. Yes, Mr. Barber, did you have a question before we begin?
Does this work?
Yes.
I just want to clarify, because I know all of you, you all know me, working for Supervisor Dave Pine, I work at the county, and I want to make it clear and on record that I am not representing the county. I'm not representing Supervisor Pine. I am Michael Barber, a resident that lives at 1316 Palm. The local residents that are concerned here pulled me in. They said, hey, you know about this, so can you do the presentation for me? So that's why I'm here. I just want to make that clear that I am a Michael Barber, resident of Burlingame,
Noted.
2 blocks from this.
All right. Well, thank you for that. Madam City Clerk, are we ready? All right. You have 10 minutes. Thank you.
So can we get the, okay. Thank you. So I just want to start, this is looking at this historically. I looked at a lot of historical maps. This is really Terrace Creek Lagoon. It's a forgotten lagoon. And as you'll see, next slide, please. That's a map that you've seen. It's the flood zone, the photo that was taken here before. That was in the back corner there. Next slide, please. You've seen this. This was in the staff report. Next slide, please. That's the FEMA flood map that anyone can pull it up. The FEMA website's pretty good where you can drill in and see things. I just want to put that in for the legend. Before I get too much farther, I just want to make it clear that I had met with a couple of the residents, Rosemary, Jonathan, who will be speaking here later, and they had asked me to, their request is that the council not necessarily deny the appeal, but pause this and think about this more. Go and visit. It sounds like you did some site visits. I actually went to their houses looking at their sump pumps, but they've got 2 industrial sump pumps. They'll talk about that later. There is some serious pumping going on in the neighbors around there. And so that's really the gist of what the appellants are asking, is a pause so that we can really look at this. Because if we do not, as a city, look at this more closely, if this kind of density occurs on other properties, we're going to be shedding more water downhill. So next slide, please. I threw this historic map in here. You can see the location of the property is what was historically the Terrence Creek, the mouth of the creek, and Sanchez Creek was just north of it. Next slide, please. That's a more detailed view. You can see that slashed green area was where the lagoon was. Where I have the property, I'm not, that's approximate location of it, but you can see the green lines are where the creek used to go. That Terrence Creek is technically not one of the 6 creeks that's mentioned because it's technically goes down Oak Grove now through a storm drain. A good portion of it still drains into this property. Next slide, please. Emily, I threw this one in for you, this for your land nav days in the Army. You can see Edge Hill, which is the round area just above. That's and the location of this, if people like Emily and I who were in the Army would know that this is an extreme low point. And I've circled the neighborhood, driven it, gone on my mobility scooter, looking around, going through these areas, and it is one of the lowest points in the city of Burlingame as far as residential areas. Next slide, please. This is a really historic map before there was much there. Again, you can see that pond, the lagoon. Next slide, please. Something I thought was interesting in some of the first historical maps were, this is a mystery for me that I didn't realize that the part of Paloma that I live on was actually Grange. And if you, there's another slide later on I'll show you, but Palm and Grange were not connected. This slide here, that blue bar, is where the road was put in here. I think you can see the property is in this sort of triangle zone where at the time when they were laying out the land, they recognized at that time, this is a low point and this is where water goes. And they had no intention, this is at 1906, 1907 thereabouts, they recognized it. And the big line down the center of their map, I believe was probably a big storm drain. But I don't want to belabor that one. Next slide, please. I took the assessor's map. That yellow triangle is essentially where that lagoon was, and where the original planning maps did not have, these properties were not originally in there. And the blue line shows you the roadway that was added later on. And then I called this the mystery solved because I've always walked by and I see Grange Road and I was always wondering what that was. Grange Road ended at what is now Paloma and Edge Hill. Next slide. This is where I really want to get into some of the details. The stars are the projects that Kevin had pointed out. 3 of those projects, when they put their water out on the street, guess where that water is going to go? Down to 900 Paloma. And something I thought about after I left the last staff meeting or the planning meeting was, you know, it's really interesting. If this goes through and this becomes the standard, this property is going to flood. I don't care. Engineering, permeable surfaces, all this water is going there. With the kind of storms we're getting, that property will flood, and so will the neighboring flood areas. I'm not an engineer, but I've been studying flooding for the last 12 years. This property is going to flood. And just FYI, that other green star there, it's before any of our time in the city, but my understanding is, maybe your attorney can look into it. That property at 934 Paloma was rebuilt courtesy of the city of Burlingame because something happened with a storm drain. I don't know the history of that. Next slide, please. This is the other area where I really wanted to emphasize. It's a bit of a messy slide. I had to slap this together, but I used the assessor's map. There's a ton of water going in. The arrows coming out are really about, if you have cement base of those new buildings, the water is going to bounce off. And I don't understand how those vents are going to work when they're more than a foot above. The water is not going to be more than a foot above. It's going to hit the walls and it's going to bounce off and it's going to go to the other properties. The water's coming into this property. And now, yeah, okay, we got some permeable surface, but at the high precipitation rates, it's going to flood this area. I guarantee you, we're going to see flooding here. If this project goes through, and I understand you've got constraints because of the state and ADU laws and all this other stuff. So I understand you're between a rock and a hard place, but I can guarantee you this property will flood in the future if it's built as, which is why I suggested pilings. Next slide, please. So I just threw in a bunch of photos here. This is the original photo. Next slide, please. This was after the January. Next slide, please. Next slide. Just going through photos that were taken. And I want to, Jonathan will touch on this, but there's a palm tree and a redwood tree that he will discuss about. But one of the concerns, if you can go through the slides, Kevin touched on this. I, at the planning meeting, suggested, I don't really understand why we use this traditional concrete base with vents in an area that will pool water. This is a low point. It's a natural lagoon. Yeah, it's not the coast, but why, next slide, and this has been my final slide. Why not go to pilings? Why not consider that? And maybe that's not possible for this project, but as a city, you really want to rethink how we build in flood zones. Because, yeah, that, got some extra time here, I didn't expect, but I understand that it will be difficult for the council because of all the regulations required to modify things, but a solution is to suggest that this property be built on pilings. Because if they're built on pilings, the water will have a place to go. With the water retention, with the permeable surface, as it stands now, there's going to be 5 to 6 feet of crawl space. I don't think of that as crawl space. That's, you could have a nice big room down there, you know, put your pool table down there. And those vents are not going to, you know, maybe the vents on that property on Laguna will do something. Last thing I want to point out is after the planning commission or your approval, there is no transparency as to what happens with construction there. And that is the concern. How do the neighbors know that the roots aren't getting cut or they're putting the vents in at the right place? The building inspectors have a ton of work to do. And that property on Laguna, by the way, was red tagged, as I noted in my, it was red tagged multiple times, and it's not clear to the public that they were ever addressed. And so I'm going to finish on that note. How do the neighbors know that if you approve this, that everything that they say they're going to do happens? There's no transparency. Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate your comments, Mr. Barber, and I know the appellants appreciate you stepping forward to communicate their concerns. So thank you for the presentation.
Thank you.
We now have an opportunity as council to ask some clarifying questions for the appellant. Does anybody have questions for Mr. Barber?
Hi.
Yes, Councilmember Brownrigg.
Thank you, Madam Vice Mayor. So I just wanted to understand a little bit better. So one, I guess one question I have is, in your opinion, which I realize you're not an expert, but in your opinion, is the water on the site in that, like in the backyard and stuff, the pictures, is that coming from water falling on the site and being retained, or it's running onto the site from elsewhere, or both?
It's both.
It's both. So it's also that water's coming onto the site from other properties
Yes, and
or the street.
well, and this is why I think the having more time, I mean, maybe you can't, but going there and I went to Rosemary and Jonathan's house, and their driveways are on Edge Hill, and looking at where their sump pumps are. I mean, they're like serious sump pumps. I've got a sump pump, but you know, it's mini thing compared to what they have. That's on their driveways. If those sump pumps aren't there, that water would flow straight into this property. And as it turns out, it's going to get pumped up to Edge Hill. It kind of works its way back down anyway, but it's not directly there. That's why it's so key to, you look at the geography, and I actually looked on the Laguna side, and there's enough slope there that it really is a bowl. And as being on the stormwater subcommittee, I've had a chance to work with Martin and great team. But that stormwater drain there is a 30-year flood, and that's the max it can handle because of high tides and everything else, and just the amount of volume of water. You can't build. you can give them all the money in the world. You can't build anything above a 30-year flood. And that's right, that's what's draining that area. So if that thing is maxed out and the tide is high, water's coming down into this bowl, this property's flooding.
And so that brings me, thank you, Mr. Barber, to my second question, which is, I just want to make sure I understand why, in your judgment, it's better to be on stilts than to have walls with penetrations. So the stilts do what? So then the water,
Water has more room to, I mean, think about if you were building, imagine the water's there all the time. I mean, you asked that question about where the water level is.
yeah.
I mean, it's historically a lagoon. It's still technically a lagoon. The geography never changed. I mean, we put a bunch of storm pipes and stuff in there. But if you think of building on a lagoon, would you build with a foundation or would you build with stilts or pilings?
Right.
That's really that's the reason I'm saying pilings, because it allows room for water to do what it does. I mean, because
As opposed to bouncing off and going somewhere else.
somewhere else. And there's nowhere else for it to go except.
So it tells the sorry to put words, I'm not trying to put words in your mouth, but it tells the property owner if you're going to be a catchment basin, then you've got to catch it. You can't bounce it off to somebody else. That's
Exactly, and which technically those vents are supposed to do, but
I see.
I mean, I'm not an engineer, but I have I mean, some of those vents on those properties, well, I bet you, I put money down, they're never going to see water flowing through. So I don't understand the point of it. I'm not an engineer, but I've seen the water in my own property upstream. And I look at where the water is. I know where I'm going to put my sandbags. I mean, Rosemary, and her family's lived there for years. So anyway.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Other questions? Councilmember Stevenson. And if council had questions for staff at this point, would that be appropriate or exclusively for the appellant?
This is mainly for the appellant.
Thank you.
But certainly, at some point, before your deliberation, if you need additional staff input, we're also available.
Okay. What we'll do is we'll have additional time for staff questions before the public comment section. Okay, so any other questions for the appellant?
I see that.
Mayor Coulson, thank you.
Thank you. Yes. So based on the photographs that we saw, the site is obviously currently flooding and flooding extensively. Is there any mitigation on the site now? Are there any French drains? Are there any tie-ins to the sewer? So everything is right now just raining, falling, flooding with no evacuation
Correct.
mitigations. Okay.
Right. I mean, the only mitigations are what the neighbors are doing to prevent water from coming out. But
Right. Okay. Thank you. That's helpful.
Thank you, Mayor Coulson. All right, seeing no other questions for the appellant, we are going to move on to the third section, where we give the respondent, the applicant for this project, the opportunity to have a 10-minute presentation as well. It's not a dialogue with council at this point. It is a 10-minute presentation. And then following the presentation, we'll have an opportunity to ask the questions of the respondent. So with that, who is speaking for the respondent? And if you could introduce yourself and thank you for joining us tonight.
Good evening, Commission. Tim Rudins, project designer. I'm going to keep this very short. Mr. Gardner did a very good presentation of what the Planning Commission had heard and what they've seen. There's a few things lacking. In our neighborhood outreach before all of this, we had a meeting at the community center with all the neighbors. One of the gives or one of the added items that we gave to the owners or to the neighbors, we already did a complete civil engineering drawing for this project. Martin Kwan has already looked at it. No one ever does this in planning. We did this for the benefit and to possibly put people at ease. That was kind of done, and not really anyone's really given any input or saying thank you for doing that before building. I've worked in San Mateo County for over 20 years, so that never happens. Number two, everyone is correct. There is no mitigation. To answer the mayor's question. Thirdly, that existing property, as you can see by the existing survey and the pictures that the neighbors had provided, most of it's concrete and it's hard and it's clay. We're getting rid of all of that. We're gonna have green, we're gonna have vegetation that's upkept and actually lets water go into the surface. That property was not taken care of forever. It was just kind of left. That is a huge, huge issue that we're correcting. Number four, when we go back or when the building department does its plan check on the civil, which they already pre-did during planning, you will see we have a complete catchment system underneath the new driveway. That catchment system takes the water that is falling down onto the roof and onto our property, including probably a lot of the neighbors, because we are the low point and we understand that. It goes into this huge plastic tube. It's basically like a 4-foot culvert. We're using a local engineer, and that basically fills up and then it discharges on a time release so that hopefully in time it will catch up. As in number five, the point about putting it on pilings, it just would look horrible, number one. Number two, the sheer value of that is just not there. It just doesn't make sense. Another point, number six, about the crawl space vents. I've done 3 projects in Napa County in flood zones. You have to keep the vent a maximum of 8 inches from the natural grade. How do we know that? Or how does that get done in the field? I come out twice a month and I inspect the project. Also, the building inspector, and if the neighbors want to come out during construction, I will lead them through. I've had experience with this and with FEMA. There is a lot of oversight. So I don't know where that comment comes from, but I'm here to answer any of your questions. We had a very, good planning experience, and we outreach to the neighbors, and again, we have a full civil drawing. So I think we're just a little flabbergasted. It's a good site. There's really no other parcel there that's not already built. So to do this to us would be very detrimental. I'm just a little nervous tonight. That's it. So if you have any questions, I'll definitely answer them for you. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Radin. Appreciate that. We're going to close the respondent's presentation, and we appreciate your being here. Council colleagues, any questions for the applicant? Madam Mayor.
Thank you very much, Madam Vice Mayor. To the applicant, do you have an estimate of the total cost of civil engineering and new drainage cisterns, the whole system that you're putting into this project?
We don't have an estimate, but just in my opinion, it's probably 80 to 120,000.
Okay. And there was a mention, you sort of alluded back to it, and maybe this is a better question for staff, but that there's no transparency around if these things actually get built. I have experience building a house in Burlingame. My experience was that the inspectors are routinely out there, and if there is even a tiny infraction of the plans, they are not passing you in inspection. Is that consistent with your experience?
Yes. I mean, I deal with it every month with questions happening about the plans don't match what's on site.
Mm-hmm. So our inspectors will be out and inspecting your work from start to beginning, and you will have to have sign-offs that they're in compliance with what's been approved?
Correct. And I'm there as well to review what the contractor's doing and to make sure it physically works. Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Other questions? Okay, seeing none. All right, then we are going to say thank you. And we are going to provide this opportunity for colleagues to ask any questions of staff that maybe have come up at this point before we open to public comment. I'll ask Director Gardner, do you have one of the last things in the presentation and that the appellant brought up, do you have any concerns about making sure that the plans are going to match what's actually built? Can you talk to a little bit about the process for that? How we can ensure and how the neighbors can be sure that plans would be built as spec.
It is true, our inspectors are sticklers. I think the example of the house on Chula Vista is a good one in that it was red tagged for a reason. So somebody caught something, presumably there was an issue, and our inspectors would not let it pass. And then, as the mayor mentioned, she's had experience. I hear from frustrated residents that our inspectors are such sticklers, and but that is their obligation. It's also their ethical obligation, and they really do pay attention to this. It extends also, I know one of the concerns of a neighbor is tree protection measures, and they check that as well. So if a plan says that there shall be tree protection measures, then we monitor that seriously through construction, and you want to make sure that the trees have the proper buffer zone around them, that the root system is not being damaged through any kind of heavy equipment rolling above or what have you. So again, we really take these plans very seriously.
Questions, Councilmember Stevenson? Yeah.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. Curious about the efficacy of the vents and evidence around, because obviously they're in building code now. So there is some efficacy, but I wanted to kind of get the perspective of the planning department on, this issue of maybe rebounding off the wall before it actually gets in through the vent and this type of element. Is that a big concern?
I mean, it's not so much a planning concern, so we do rely on both the building division as well as the engineering public works department, because that really is their expertise. So this has been kind of a learning process for me as well. But what we have learned is that the point of the vents as well as the points of the piling is not to have water just rushing through. It's to protect the building from structural failure. So the intent is not to have a bunch of pooled water sitting under a house. In fact, you don't want that. Yeah. You want the water to enter but exit pretty quickly, because pooled water is not good in any circumstance. And I think it is worth mentioning that, yeah, the current site has not been designed for drainage, and that shows. The new project would, and also, as we've mentioned, is not allowed to overflow onto adjacent properties. And again, that's something that Public Works Engineering takes very seriously as they review the civil plans, because that's an obligation of the project. So that's as counterintuitive as it may sound, the development of the site will actually help the drainage from the existing condition.
The mayor has a question.
Yes, Madam Mayor, go ahead.
Thank you. Director Gardner, when I look at the aerial map and just walk the street over there near Paloma Park, and you mentioned it's an R2 neighborhood. So it appeared to me that several of the other properties adjacent and nearby are also heavily lot covered compared to maybe say what would be an R1 designation. And so if those properties were built years ago, I would assume that at some point they would also have their own drainage. So if they are in fact draining off onto this property, those properties are actually the ones that may have some of the problems.
It's possible, yeah, there's a wide variety that, one of the interesting aspects of the R2 district is it does have this very wide variety. There's single family homes, there's small apartment buildings, there's duplexes, there's a whole variety of every age you can think of. I don't know the whole history of our stormwater standards, but I would assume maybe they weren't as stringent for the older buildings as they are now. That's probably as much as what I want to say. I don't want to really speculate on.
Yeah, no, just curious. So there are other properties that have pretty big lot coverage, and if water is draining off of them now into the other lot, we can assume, I mean, technically that's not legal, correct? Technically, you're supposed to manage your own property on your own site.
Yes, yeah. So if there are any examples of properties that are spilling over onto their neighbors, that's something that shouldn't be happening, and it's something that can, that's a whole nother aspect of our work is dealing with enforcement of situations like that.
Okay, thank you.
Councilmember Papajohn, sure.
Director, could you please, I know you, could you repeat what you said about it's counterintuitive that the drainage would actually be better? I just wanted to have you repeat that so I could hear it one more time.
So the existing condition, although it's vegetated and a lot of open land in the area, doesn't have any drainage. So we saw some photos of pooling and there's really nowhere for that water to go other than into the ground. And then where there's a patio or something, it can't even do that. So the water tends to accumulate there and then sit, or worse, it spills into neighboring properties. So with the new project, you can see there's lawn areas at the back, there's the permeable pavers in the center, there's the margin areas along the edges. And as the applicant mentioned, the permeable paving actually has its own drainage system. I'll say it's not unlike what we're looking at for the town square here in downtown Burlingame, which also has a fairly interesting drainage system all underneath. You would never know it's in there, but for the same reasons, you've got a lot of paved area, but the water needs to go somewhere, and that has to be designed. So as the counterintuitive part is by developing the site, it's improving the drainage, even though it's adding buildings to the site. It may not seem intuitive, but compared to the existing condition where it's not engineered or designed for drainage, it would be an improvement.
Thank you.
Yes, go ahead, Councilmember Brownrigg.
Thank you. Just two quick final questions. One, so the drainage under the permeable pavers, that water also goes into the dry well, is that right?
The applicant may want to give a little more detail on that. Some of it does go into the ground, so so we do see in the section that there's kind of a combination of gravel and soil and such that it can percolate, but then it does also have a drainage system which collects water and then puts it into the retention tank.
Okay, thank you. And then my other question is for the city attorney. So without going into too much detail, I think most of us up here recall a home that had an unfortunate situation, I mean geographic situation, where during a very heavy storm, a great deal of water was channeled directly into the home, causing significant damage and distress to the homeowner. And I think the city was taken to court. And so I'm wondering what our liability is for approving a property in which flooding may occur. You recall the case I'm talking about?
So I think that was a little before my time.
Oh,
So I was
really?
in
That long ago?
in that. So
All right.
I can't.
Then I apologize.
Okay.
But I still wonder.
Well, so I'm not going to comment on the city's liability of approving any particular project.
Okay.
I think that part of the answer to your question, if I can answer it a little indirectly, is that the planning standards and the engineering standards that any home is required to build to are designed in order to reduce the risk of both the building, for the person who's going to live in it and the surrounding area, right? The health, public health and safety, right? That's what those standards are there for. And so in approving those standards, which are codified in your general plan and in your zoning ordinance, which include the FEMA regulation, right? And as well as the engineering and building standards that are required to build to, if the city is applying those building and planning regulations in a reasonable way, then you can never prevent anybody from suing you. But the city, I think, has a very strong defense that it reasonably applied its laws, which are designed to protect the public health and safety.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Brownrigg. Seeing no other questions, I just want to have some big picture to make sure I'm tracking all this. So this property obviously is in a flood zone, a FEMA flood zone. These are general plan, our zoning laws. These to address the drainage are local laws, but they're really also, I'm understanding, dictated by FEMA in a flood zone like this?
It's a whole combination. So FEMA and then also California Building Code has standards as well. So they need to comply with all of it.
Okay. And so this project does, if it went through Planning Commission, the Planning Commission found that it complied with those standards.
And that's with the benefit of having staff done that check to, the Planning Commission does ask staff, does this comply with the standards? And they ask the staff members that are most familiar with those standards. And so when the Planning Commission approved the project, both engineering staff and then building staff also weighed in to say that, yes, they have looked at this and it does comply.
Okay. So then the heart of the question, there's an important question for me. Those standards, how do those standards speak to, I think we've heard it in the testimony, but I want to make sure I understand. The standards speak to when there's building on a parcel like this, the standards say how the drainage has to happen in respect to how it impacts the neighboring properties. And those standards, are they clear? Do they require it not to be designed in such a way how it impacts the neighboring properties? They by law, it cannot throw water on other people's property. Am I understanding that correctly?
That's right. And in particular, the the standard of expectation of not having water on other properties, that's a Burlingame standard. It applies everywhere. So it's not just.
So it's not just a flood zone.
The flood.
You can't dump water on your neighbor's property. It's got to be designed in such a way.
And that includes the town square. So we need to manage the drainage of the town square. We can't just dump it onto the neighboring property or into the storm sewer without having managed it on site first.
Okay, so when you build, the standards require the management of that water to be determined on the parcel.
Correct.
Okay. All right. With that, I think we are going to move on to the public comment section of the evening. And so anybody that has not spoken tonight, so that means not Mr. Barber and not Mr. Rudin, but other members of the public, even if you're named on the appellant, you may speak tonight, 3 minutes each. I will keep very close time. And again, don't mean to be disrespectful. If you hit 3 minutes, I'm going to say thank you very much and we're going to move on. So everybody has equal opportunity, okay? So we have, Madam City Clerk, are these yellow cards related to this item?
They should be labeled which one
Let me
about.
see. Yes. Oh, okay, 11A, yes. So thank you for the yellow card. I'm sorry, I can't read the writing too much, but I believe we have Rosemary. So I'm assuming that's Rosemary McLeod. Would like to come forth. Don't mean to insult your handwriting. I apologize. Thank you for joining us tonight. And when you get to the podium and you begin your remarks, you'll have 3 minutes.
You've seen these pictures, but I have copies of what the backyard looks like. Okay. Good evening. I'm Rosemary McLeod. I'm here with my husband, Steve McLeod. We live at 1316 Edge Hill Drive. McLeods have lived there since 1955. Our house is directly behind 900 Paloma. This is what we see when we look over the fence. Originally, we had frequent calls to the fire department to come out and pump under our house because we had a gas heater. We now have 5 sump pumps. 2 years ago, we installed a commercial grade pump in our driveway. And even with recent atmospheric rivers, global warming, it's a challenge to keep up with the water in a flood zone. We cannot handle any more water, which is what will happen with the current plan at 900 Paloma. A lot of this is going to be a little bit of repetition, but an elevated crawl space with vents that are too high, people are saying 8 inches, 12 inches. So what happens to that water when these buildings are going to be just a couple feet from our backyard? It's going to be a dam, and all that water is going to go on to the 12 adjacent properties, which already have problems with flooding. As Michael said, many creeks converge in the area. And according to the city's website, these creeks are a critical stormwater conveyance system that protects homes, businesses, and transportation networks. The property is in a flood zone created by the confluence of Sanchez and Terrace Creek, along with many tributaries that branch off of them. As we've all said, 900 is the low point, and we call this the lagoon. When the lagoon fills, we can currently handle the small amount of water that comes into our property, but we cannot handle any more water. So Burlingame requires commercial buildings to be elevated on piers or posts. And I do agree with Michael, if we could just have these on posts, we wouldn't have the dams and the raised area until the water reaches the vents. Just like, you know, the property that Mr. Gardner showed at the beach. What we really want is just a little bit more time. Just more time to study this. We're requesting 120 days. That's all, extension to further study. This all seems so rushed. He came in with a plan of 5 feet of soil. There was absolutely no outreach. The only reason we knew is that we came down, and thank heavens for Amelia and Martin, and we looked at the plans. And that was going to be surrounded by a retaining wall. And then there was another plan with water being pumped to the easement. Well, anyone who knows anything about that area, Laguna has a tremendous flooding problem. And to even propose pumping water to the easement shows that there's not a clear understanding of the flooding that we face. Oh, that's it?
Thank you. Thank you. We do have the clock there.
I didn't even see the.
Thank you, Ms. McLeod. We appreciate you being with us. I don't have any other yellow cards, but I assume there are other people who would like to speak. So when you come forth to the podium, you can just line up. You have 3 minutes. If you're comfortable saying your name and your address, you have that choice. If not, you don't have to, but we'll give you 3 minutes to speak. Sure, please come to the podium. Yes, sir.
These accompany the picture with my description.
Thank you.
All right, hold on. I got to go fast. My name is Jonathan Friedman, 1312 Edge Hill Drive, immediately behind the furthest part of the property. I want to speak, first of all, to the 2 trees that are there. One is on our property. It's a beautiful palm tree, beautiful coastal redwood that we have maintained. It's secure. The roots go into the property next door. And 2 feet or 3 feet away from our tree is this beautiful palm on their property. Now, Tim has pledged and the planning commission has made it a condition that these will be protected. But until I just heard from you, I didn't know how this would be done. But I'm very concerned that subcontractors could come in there with a bulldozer and hit those things, and it would be a fait accompli. The trees would die. It would be a safety hazard for the big redwood. And how do we know? What recourse do we have? The second thing I want to say is that until Rosemary brought it up, no one was really talking about the future, the present and the future. The plans and the regulations have all been drafted from the past point of view. We all know that we're facing more water. If the defense for this is the standards were met in this meeting at this time, the other fact is that the law to protect neighboring properties from being flooded will be irrespective of the plans drafted in the past, because there is going to be more and more water coming down. I'm a Pulitzer Prize winning journalist and author. I've been writing about climate change for the last 4 years, interviewing people around the world. And what I found out is that while this is a global problem, there are local solutions. So in my own community, I'm hoping that people can give us a pause of 120 days to look at this in the context of the future challenges facing this. If this is approved in the lowest place, it will greenlight other properties adjoining to exercise their rights to build ADUs. And all of this water will be pumped into the same storm drain, which is already way too small. There has to be, I'm pleading for the city council to really look at this, not just this plan, but future plans with this in perspective, because there is going to be required new kinds of building codes such as stilts and water diversion projects and storm drains for the future. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Mr. Friedman. We appreciate you being with us tonight. Appreciate your comments. Any other members of the public wish to speak? Sorry, you've already had your chance. But anybody who hasn't spoken yet? Going once? Going twice? We're closing the public hearing. Okay, we are now moving into the final section of this appeal, where the appellant has a rebuttal of 5 minutes. So who is going to be speaking on behalf of the appellant? Mr. Barber or, okay. And are there any rules, Mr. City Attorney? Does it have to be someone who hasn't spoken during public comment?
It's completely up to the chair.
Okay.
You would.
I will give 5 minutes to whomever, or whichever combination of people would like to speak. So, all right.
Jonathan, if you want to take I'm just coming up here to sit, Jonathan, if you want to take time. You're one of the.
All right, then what we'll do is we're going to start the clock and you can share the 5 minutes beginning now.
Okay.
Mr. Barber, if you want to start.
I've made the point. I think the point that's been brought up again is that the standards, I wrote this in the FEMA standards are ridiculously low. I was, as I mentioned in my my letter, that I worked with FEMA. I was the de facto county rep with them, and we worked on the appeal that San Bruno and South San Francisco did. They had hydrologists coming in and say, this doesn't make sense, da, da, da. They said, doesn't matter. We have our rules and this is the way it is. Their standards of only taking a 10-year flood event that's what you have to retain. A 10-year flood event, which, I mean, that's ridiculous. I mean, that's, as I said in the letter, we just had probably a 30-year event on Saturday. when we had 1.3 inches of rain here. That, you are not required to hold that water on your property. Yeah, a 30-year storm. So that storm on Saturday, you do not have to retain that. Correct me if I'm wrong, but that was my understanding from FEMA, is you only have to hold on to 10-year floods, which is just a regular storm rain. So I'm going to let Jonathan take more time.
Okay, so quickly, in response to Tim, quoting him, he said, discharging it from those holding tanks, he said, hopefully in time, it will catch up. Hopefully in time, it will catch up. He's coming and going. He's building this thing. And I think it's a very good project in many ways. But we are going to be there. In time, hopefully it will catch up. We don't know what pressure is going to be put on this system. And he said, if neighbors want to come out during the construction and look, Tim, right now, there's a no trespassing sign there. We can't even look in that area. Will that change during the construction, and will building inspectors look at the ground? And he says he's flabbergasted and it's detrimental. I don't blame him. It's very flabbergasted to go through all these appeals and things like that. But we're going to be living with it in our children. I have 3 grandchildren, 4 children. We have a stake in more housing for the community. We do. But we want it to be done not in the lowest, most flood-prone places with the engineering regulations for the past. We want the city to look for the future. Rosemary.
Now I know there's a clock, so I'm going to pay more attention. As one of the members brought up, the city paid to build a new home for Elaine. She's 3 doors up from the property in 900 Paloma. After her property flooded due to insufficient water management. And in addition, the city was sued by property owners along Burlingame's Bayshore following flooding. The city did not take steps it should have taken to prevent these floods or minimize the damage. All we're asking is for just a little bit more time to study the impact of flooding in the area. We all remember New Year's Eve when Burlingame Avenue was practically a river and all the stores, had to have the sandbags. And just as an aside, we've been promised multiple times that there will be a wonderful addition to the neighborhood, a brand new, beautiful home on Paloma. I sent you all pictures of the home. The weeds are over 4 feet tall. I went out there with a tape measure. Garbage in the front yards and 20 inches of weeds on the sidewalk. This is, it sounds like a lot of you have gone out there. This is a very walkable area. This is a dangerous situation. We've got lots of families, lots of children. We just have a lot of foot traffic. People going to and from Paloma Park, going to and from McKinley School. The home appears abandoned. Windows are always covered. No people or cars visible. We've been promised many times that the owners will be living in the front house. But if you look, the 2 big signs in the front windows with everything closed, weeds and garbage everywhere, says warning, 24-hour surveillance, private property, no trespassing. Certainly not the great addition to the neighborhood we were promised. Thank you.
Thank you.
Still running it.
We have 15 seconds.
Tim has been the only representative. Nobody's ever met the owners of the property. So that's one of the concerns too. It's a ghost on from our perspective.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Barber, and thanks to all the appellants for having their final rebuttal. We've closed at 5 minutes, and I'm going to give colleagues any final chance to ask questions of staff, just as the privilege of the chair, if they have final questions before we deliberate. Councilmember Brown, right?
I guess I have a question, which is probably a little difficult for our staff to answer, but the neighborhood is asking for additional time to study hydrology, construction techniques, and alternatives. Do we feel that we need to study the hydrology more?
Thanks, Director Martuzo, Director of Public Works.
Well, the answer is that as part of the project conditions of approval, one of the condition is that prior to issuance of building permit, the project is required to submit the hydrologic calculations to show that the proposed project would not result in adverse impact to adjacent properties. That is one of the condition. And so when the plans get submitted, staff will review that as part of the analysis and determine whether there are any adverse impact. One thing to remember is that this is a flood zone, and any properties are all properties are subjected to flooding. The question is, it's difficult to answer when that flooding will occur. What 24-hour rainstorm, 10 hours rainstorm, 100-year rainstorm, all those different probabilities, right? And whether that occurred on a dry day, dry season, or it occurs after several rain events. So all those are different probabilities. Now, the question for staff is that flooding, all these parcels in the flood zone are subjected to flooding during, and that's why they're classified as flood zone. The question is whether the incremental increase in flooding as a result of this project is what the analysis will look at. Whether the impact, the flooding that may occur as a result of this project, is that going to be more than what it currently does in a certain event? And the project will be required to address that on site to manage the flooding that project generated flooding, and then whatever the drainage that goes to the project. So we haven't seen the details of the hydrologic calculations, so that will be when staff will determine that it has met the requirements of the conditions.
Thank you. All right, Councilmember Stevenson.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. There's no mitigation measures today, and although the coverage of the lot isn't what is proposed, but there's a lot of cement. So I'm curious because since it's the low point, it's basically serving as a safety zone for the rest of the households that probably have sump pumps and other things that are going off when there are some flooding. So I guess my question is there currently any water that's going on to the other properties because there's a lack of mitigation today? And how has that been assessed, if at all?
I'm unaware of such a situation that is occurring. It is very probable that when heavy rain events occur, the water flows wherever there's room to flow. So the low spots, this is a bowl, essentially, this area. So the water naturally will take longer to drain. And it also depends on whether there's a high tide or not. But eventually it does drain. And from time to time, this area has been impacted due to flooding, and because it's a flood zone.
Thank you. I see the mayor has a question, and then we'll get into deliberation.
Thank you. This is potentially a question for Director Gardner. On a number of the emails we received regarding this project, there was commentary around concerns about density, no parking, and, sort of the request seemingly of, can't we make this less dense too? And I just want to have Director Gardner re-explain, although this council did take a very firm stance and in fact wrote letters on multiple occasions, and even I went up at least 20 times, it felt like, to Sacramento to talk about the, concerns that we have around density, especially in our neighborhoods. We are subject to the requirements of the state. And can you elaborate a little bit on that again, please?
Certainly. And so one of the points I wanted to make when describing the unusually large size of the lot was that it does invite more development because the development standards are based on lot coverage, lot size, what have you. So because it's such a large lot, it allows a fairly substantial new home plus the 2 accessory dwelling units. Under state law, the accessory dwelling units are not counted towards floor area or lot coverage. So those are permitted, pretty much as of right, assuming they adhere to the standards that the city has adopted. And the standards that the city has adopted are mandated by the state legislation. So in fact, something that will come to the council later this year is we got a letter from the Department of Housing and Community Development outlining areas of our secondary or accessory dwelling unit ordinance that need to be updated to reflect the various variations of state density legislation. I think so that I hoping that addresses the point. It's so some of it's a combination of just how the development standards apply to an unusual lot, and then add in the provisions of the accessory dwelling units, which are allowed. And we are seeing more accessory dwelling units. It's rare to see 2 on one property. That's unusual, but again, because this is such a big property, it's a little different from all the others. I don't, so we have read the neighbors' letters, and I do appreciate there's been a lot of thought into it and a lot of forward thinking, and really appreciate that. It's good food for thought. I don't think you're going to see developments similar to this on this scale, just because this is such an unusual lot. As mentioned, we tend to see at most 1 ADU on a lot. Most of these lots have already been developed. This lot was unusual that it has just 1 house at the front and a very large undeveloped area at the back. So I wouldn't say that this is necessarily setting a precedent for future development.
Thank you, Mr. Gardner. All right, with that, I think we've had thorough question and answer. We've heard from appellants, we've heard from the applicant. It is time now for council deliberation. So colleagues, this is where we can offer opinions or thoughts or ask questions of colleagues for an exchange. Who would like to begin? Anyone?
Bueller,
Anyone?
the mayor.
Madam Mayor would like to begin? Go ahead.
Thank you. I'll go ahead and begin. This is a obviously very emotional question and concerning situation for the neighbors. And as someone who sits on one shoreline, I have been focused on working on flood and sea level rise mitigation and strategies. And I think this probably opens the door for us to, and this is one of the reasons I spoke to Len Matterman is, so far the agency's focus has really been on sea level rise and the bayfront and on the coast. But, this does offer us an opportunity to reflect and think about, more about the flooding situation as well. I do think that the developer has met the standards. I am looking at the parcel right now, seeing the lot not draining. I believe highly in civil engineering. My father was an engineer focused on water and hydraulics. So I grew up around it, and I think you can, engineer your way into a better situation. And I think that this project has met the standards that have been requested through our zoning. I am not as flexible, I guess, or we do have the density question is just one that our hands are a bit tied on that, and so that one I want to make sure that people understand this is exactly what we can and can't do with regard to density. So given that the Planning Commission has looked at everything that the between $80,000 and $120,000 of work to mitigate, remove stormwater and drainage, my inclination would be to agree with the Planning Commission. But I'll be open to hearing what other colleagues have to say, and of course, my opinion is always flexible.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. And again, what I probably should have done before deliberation, the staff report lays out a couple of options. We can deny the appeal and uphold the Planning Commission's approval of the application, which it sounds like, Madam Mayor, you are inclined at this point to defer to what the Planning Commission decided. Number 2, grant the appeal and deny the application. Option number 3, adopt additional conditions of approval that could address issues or concerns related to other than the subject of the appeal, or remand the application to the Planning Commission for reconsideration. So staff gives us 4 options here. Would anybody like to go next, or would you like, go ahead, Councilmember Brownrigg, go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Vice Chair. So I'll tell you what I'm not doing. I'm not commenting on the style of the buildings. I don't love the site design, but that's what Planning Commission did do, and did a good job thinking through massing and spacing and so forth. So I'm not here judging the site design. I am, though, very mindful of the concerns that neighbors have about additional flooding and damage to their own homes as a result of the construction. And I have been trying to understand, where this project will come out on that balance. It seems to me, as a non-engineer, that there's every likelihood, as our staff suggested, that it may be better, that conditions may improve as a result of having a very significant dry well, as a result of having pervious pavers, that standing water may actually drain and be held in captivity, so to speak, until it's released. My problem is I don't know, and I can't tell. And I do think that the neighbors have, justified concerns based on their own lived experience in the region. So where I would prefer to go, and I realize this is an option 5 of the staff report, I'd like to see the results come back from the building department and the engineering, sort of to the Mr. Barber's comment that how will we ever know if you approve it? It'll all go into sort of a black hole of the bureaucracy, and how will we ever know? I'd love to see this come back after that hydrology work is done, after the civil engineering is approved, after our building guys have said, yes, this passes muster. This is going to hold water, or at least hold it long enough. Because if I had that testament from our team, then I would feel very comfortable approving this project. So I do appreciate the civil engineering. I think we're a lot farther ahead because you did the civil engineering, and I know exactly how much that costs. So I do appreciate that, but it's not the same as my guys reading it, thinking about it, blessing it, and then standing behind it. And standing behind it where the neighbors get to hear, like, the experts really looked at this hard and said, yeah, this is going to work. In fact, maybe even make things better. So that's where I wind up. I'd like to see this come back with that expert opinion. I'm happy approving it, but I want to know when before, the shovels hit the ground, that our team believes the water's going to stay on the site, which is what it's supposed to do. That's how I feel.
Thank you, Councilmember Brownrigg. Appreciate the comments. And I guess I'll, I want to say I really appreciate the civil discourse tonight, that everybody really was respectful of the time and respectful of each other's opinions. So thank you all. This is a parcel that's absolutely, to Mr. Barber's comments, it's in the flood zone. It's going to have a lot of water problems. It's low lying, just like many of your homes. My home is getting closer as FEMA reports get updated and we're holding our breath, but in the future, we could be dealing with it too, but right now we're not in the flood zone. So when you're in the flood zone, that's what you're asking for. Here's where I come down, and I appreciate Councilmember Brownrigg's points, but I'm trying to ask myself, did the project meet the requirements of our general plan, of our zoning, and of what FEMA tells us the rules are to make sure that this project is not putting water on an adjacent property? And it's, when I read the meeting minutes, to your point, have our experts looked at it? Mr. Kwan was in the meeting and saying, this meets the standard. That's what I heard and what I think I'm hearing tonight from our staff. So if it meets the standards, then did we apply the standards fairly? Without saying, well, we don't really like this standard or we don't want to apply it now. We have rules of the road. Did we apply them fairly? And I think the Planning Commission did. I'm most concerned with, does this project create adverse impacts on the neighbors? And what I'm hearing is FEMA doesn't allow us to do that, or it wouldn't have met the standards. And I think I also heard that an unimproved lagoon parcel that has some concrete that doesn't have any drainage will probably be better when it's been thoroughly engineered and probably be better to deal with the flooding. So as I'm thinking through all this, I'm hopeful that not only will the improved area probably be better for definitely that parcel, and hopefully the neighborhood, by having activity there and having the weeds cut down, having people living there, will make it more attractive for the neighborhood as well. It's a lot of stuff on a small parcel. You know, everybody has their own opinions about that, but there's a lot of laws that tell us what we can and cannot do. To the question of, is it appropriate to delay the conversation? I know how much care and thought we have to put into changing zoning regulations and reconsidering. I think it's I would like to have a future conversation and a study. Are these FEMA standards appropriate, or should we be building towards the 500-year flood or the 1,000-year flood? I think that's a reasonable conversation. We're not gonna be able to resolve that in 120 days. I guarantee you, having gone through what it's like to general plan and zoning. And so then I have the next question. What about due process for the people who have put forth an application that followed all our rules, whether we like them or not? These are the rules we set, to bait and switch and say, well, we had these rules, but we just want to delay it another amount of time. Doesn't seem fair to me. And I'm trying to think about the fairness of it. And I hear the neighbors' concerns. Change, especially building on a parcel that's in a flood zone, is a little scary. I'm not sure I would want to do that, but engineering, you know, probably can do magical things. I want to be fair. And so that's kind of where I come down. I'm not sure delaying for 120 days is going to get us the answers we need. I would like to see a future conversation about our zoning standards, and I'd like staff to really study it and look into it. And do we need to do more engineering? But right now I find I'm satisfied that FEMA knows what at least they're talking about, and there's reasonable standards here. So, and I do respect the efforts of the Planning Commission to really dig into this too. So that's kind of where I'm coming down right now. And I would be inclined, I think I'm aligned with the mayor, to uphold the conditions of the Planning Commission's approval. Thank you, Councilmember Stevenson.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. I echo your comments. I think what we don't know is we have a basically unmitigated site that is in its lowest part of the flood area in that particular neighborhood. And there is standing water that accumulates. But going through our standards, going through the process, going through the analysis that our Planning Commission, that are in the civil engineering side of it, there is a possibility that this will be even improved and less risk for those neighbors that are nearby. Now, I agree with the Vice Mayor about, you know, re-looking at changes to the process and our plan, and that's not going to be solved in 6 months. So I come down on the side of option 3, really, which is approving for the applicant. But I would like to see checkpoints through this and some of the analysis from a hydrology standpoint that we can monitor that, or at least look into that as it relates to as this project is going, whether it's the tree roots, whether it's, you know, the catch basin and these types of things. I live in a very close to a floodplain as well. And let's face it, the neighbor's yard is draining into my yard every time it rains. And so, you know, we have these things that are in place to be smart about it, to apply our analysis and be sure over time. But, you know, that's where I come down.
Thank you, Councilmember Stevenson. Councilmember Papajohn.
Yes, I do agree with my colleagues, and I won't repeat a lot of what they said, but I just would like to say that first, I know that the developer has put a lot of the project has met the California the building code, CBC, and the FEMA standards, and I just don't think it'd be fair to ask the applicant to go above and beyond that. I also know that the Planning Commission has reviewed and deliberated this project for, quite some time, and staff put a lot of thought into it as well. I had some conversations with staff, and I really respect their, diligence on reviewing the project. So, yeah, I do kind of support what the Planning Commission has approved it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Papajohn. So at this point, we have, would someone like to make a motion? And it sounds like there's two separate ideas out there. There's to deny the appeal and uphold the Planning Commission's approval of the application, or there could be an adoption of some additional conditions of approval that could address some concerns. So, Mr. City Attorney, do you have?
Thank you, Madam Vice Mayor. So one point of clarification. Councilmember Stevenson had floated the idea of adding additional conditions of approval to address tree protection and the catch basin and hydrology. So one thing I want to make clear for the council is that the conditions of approval that the Planning Commission has already approved include those items, right?
Okay, so that's been addressed.
There is a tree protection condition of approval, as Director Martuza noted. There is a condition of approval that prior to the building permit issuance, that the hydrology calcs would have been confirmed, and that the plan set that was up for approval includes the catch basin design. Right. And so that's already, like, as the plan as presented has either the design elements of the catch basin, or the Planning Commission has already imposed those conditions of approval that Councilmember Stevenson had just raised.
Okay. And it addresses the issue of flooding onto neighbors' properties.
That's correct.
Okay. So does anybody want to make a motion based on this discussion?
So just a point of clarification, if I could. So from a process of checking those things as the project is progressing, is there anything outside of our normal process that we would consider just to alleviate the concerns of those neighbors? In other words, like, it's not really denying the applicant, but this is a checkpoint. We're going to make sure when that's done, we're going to make that transparent.
Sure. The checkpoints that are written into the conditions of approval are the building permit. So for example, they cannot pull their building permit until they have cleared the hydrology calculation requirement, right? So they can't put a shovel in the ground until they have satisfied to the condition of our building department, which works in conjunction with our engineering department, that those hydrology calcs meet muster. Right. So that's already a built-in, like, they can't do anything literally to construct the project until that benchmark has been met. Okay. In terms of, the building to the design, building to the approved design, including the tree protection plan, if there is a violation of that, so let's say they don't put in the catch basin, our building inspectors, that's their job, right, is to make sure that the project is built according to the plans, and the ultimate lever that the city has is that it will not sign off on the building permit, which means that they cannot occupy the building. And that means that the homeowner cannot move in. And so if the project does not meet all of those requirements, then the city can withhold signing off on the building approval and not issuing a certificate of occupancy.
So,
Thank you. Councilmember Brownrigg.
so if I may, so I appreciate that. I think what I was trying to suggest, and there may not be a majority in favor of this, but what I was trying to suggest that given the concern of so many people over such an extended period of time, that we, in this unique case, ask the building department to come and present when it's time to issue the permit, so that there would be a transparent public hearing with the results of the hydrology, with the results of whatever additional work or requirements they've made, where they assert that, yes, indeed, seasonal high water table is X and this is 5 feet above it and all those requirements. That's what I would suggest in terms of the transparency to the neighborhood that I'd like to see. I realize it's unusual. So that's the nuance.
Okay. Any staff have any comments on that? As far as procedure, Madam Mayor, do you have any concern about adding that to a future agenda, a presentation?
Let's hear from Director Matuza maybe, but I would strongly suggest that if it's okay with Councilman Brownrigg, that actually just happened at the Planning Commission level. I think it's a public meeting. It's the appropriate place for it to be. Those are the people that have are working on this, looking at it. If it were, because I'm not really sure what the outcome would be if, it's just a confirmation. I think they're the best to confirm it. Well, we have a little powwow I see going on here. But if it were to be the council's pleasure, I think it would be appropriate to send it back to Planning Commission for the meeting. And I guess what my question would be is, if it didn't meet that, it wouldn't get its permits. So there's already kind of a built-in system.
Yes.
If it doesn't meet it, they don't get their permits, right? So then they'd have to come back again. But it could be, if you really want to, for transparency's sake, make a presentation to the Planning Commission, then they receive it, no action by them. And it's an opportunity for, the public to see that in fact, calculations have met.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Let's see what staff has to say as far as procedure, if that's appropriate to single out a project like that, or Director Gardner.
Sure. Well, I want to at least talk to the first part, which is there is a condition of approval. So in addition to the Plan Commission conditions of approval that are in this Plan Commission staff report, there's 32 conditions of approval from Public Works. Condition 31 does require, it says, due to the surrounding existing drainage pattern, a drainage plan will be required during the building permit phase to quantify the amount of stormwater that will drain to the property and how it will be retained. No greater than 40% of the parcel can be discharged from the site. So they don't get their building permit without that. So that speaks just to the kind of technicalities. Again, it's unusual to provide a report out of a building permit issuance, but at least I could say that it's already in the work plan, so to speak.
Okay. Would someone like to make a motion? Because I think we've had sufficient deliberation on this. If not,
I can go ahead, Madam Mayor. Madam Vice Mayor. Too many things going on here. Yeah, colleague. I will go ahead and make a motion to adopt, I think it's item number 3, which is, option number 3, which is to confirm the Planning Commission's approval and deny the appeal.
okay.
Is
And
that, do you want to read that?
yeah,
more
and that would be
succinctly?
deny the appeal and uphold the planning commission's approval of the application. That would be
Yes.
option number 1, correct? Because
Oh, that's number 1.
presumably the
Sorry.
conditions of approval are built in.
Yes,
Would anybody
yes,
like to
yes,
make
yes,
a second? Based on what we've heard from staff. Okay, second by Councilmember Stevenson.
May I ask a question of the motion, maker of the motion?
Yes, go ahead.
Yes.
So is the maker of the motion willing to amend the motion to require that our staff present to the planning commission when their review of all of the hydrology and the rest of it is done, so that there's a moment for transparency and public comment?
I think so long as we recognize, I'd be willing to do it so long as you recognize it's not an action item. There would be no action taken. The action would simply be the normalized process. This would just be a moment for like a study session or something, if you will, where the transparency would be available to the public, and then there would be no action taken on it. It would simply be what is normally prescribed in the process.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
Okay, and the seconder of the motion agrees to that? Okay, and it will not be actionable, just a brief presentation. Any other concerns? I do have some concerns that this is an extraordinary ask for the applicant that's out of, that's unusual,
Yeah.
but given the circumstances, I'm willing to go along as well. Roll call vote, please.
Councilmember Papajohn,
Yes.
Councilmember Brownrigg,
Yes.
Councilmember Stevenson,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Beach,
Yes.
Mayor Coulson.
Yes.
Thank you all. And I want to thank members of the public for staying through the entire discussion. That was super respectful. You could have gotten up and walked away even 5 minutes ago, but we appreciate your respect for the public process. So feel free to stick around. We've got a couple more items, but thank you all for being with us. And we appreciate the process. Here's how the rules of the road, gang. We are going to move on right now to the next item. For those of you who would like to discuss amongst yourselves, if you could just go into the foyer area, it would allow us to keep going with our meeting without disturbance. We're going to take the next item, 11B, and after the next item, we're going to take a 5-minute break because we've been going a really long time, so we can stretch our legs, and then we'll come back because we have some substantive business on the rest of the agenda. Okay, so item 11B is public hearing and the adoption of Broadway business area improvement assessments for fiscal year 24-25. Staff report, please. Thank you, our finance director.
Welcome. Good evening, Mayor and Vice Mayor and the Council Member. Welcome, new Council Member Papajohn. Tonight, at the April 1st meeting, the City Council approved a resolution and intend to hold tonight public hearing for setting the rate for fiscal year 24-25 for Broadway bid. Tonight, the council is asking to conduct public hearing and to determine if there's a protest by business that represent the majority of the value of assessment. Just for the record, let's check with our city clerk if there's any protest.
There are no protests.
Okay, with that, staff recommend to adopt the resolution and approve the assessment. I'm here to answer any question you may have.
Okay, thank you. At this point, we've received the staff report. We're going to hold a public hearing to consider any protests to the Broadway bid assessments. Before we open the public hearing, does council have any questions for staff? Okay, open the public hearing. Do we have any protests? Any comments? We are going to close the public hearing and ask the city clerk to report out any protests filed with the city.
There are none.
No protests. The protests therefore do not represent a majority of the assessments. Then we can consider adopting the resolution to set the 24-25 fiscal year assessments. Would someone like to make a motion?
So moved.
So moved. So Councilmember Brownrigg adopts the resolution to set the 24-25 fiscal year assessments. Do we have a second?
I'll second it.
Thank you, Councilmember Papajohn. We'll take a roll call vote.
Councilmember Papajohn,
Yes.
Councilmember Brownrigg,
Yes.
Councilmember Stevenson,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Beach,
Yes.
Mayor Coulson.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Motion passes unanimously. So sitting is the new smoking. We are all going to take a very brief stretch break. And then for those who want to continue, literally 5 minutes. Okay, so everybody, if you need a break, At 21:48 on my clock, we will resume. Thank you.
7th inning stretch. Does it feel good? I wasn't trying to mess up the process, but I think I like the idea of the presentation it's just transparency. That's the biggest thing. Nobody had the answer on their side. Throw you into the fire.
It's not, it's, no, it's happening. Sorry.
Am I allowed to come up here?
Hey, brother.
How are you, man?
How are you?
I'm all right.
Come on over here. Freaky to
I know,
just jump
mine are-
up. How are you? Were you in the back?
Yes,
See you.
behind Lee.
Oh, I see.
Hey, look at all those cameras.
Sorry, yeah, I didn't see you. How are you?
Hanging
Yeah?
Well, trying to.
Yeah. You mean post-COVID?
Yeah.
It was,
Well, it's not over yet. I'm just talking to Lee. He said he's. He's Andrew. I mean, it's still bad.
yeah. It's really shitty. I mean, yeah. Just gonna keep going. Like on hindsight.
There's something too bad.
That's true.
So, yeah, so I think it's very unusual.
Don't put on there yet.
No, I think just.
Yeah.
You guys are doing okay?
We're doing good. Thank you. Thank you. Yeah. You know, kids are far fun, but all seem to be sort of moving up basically. You know,
Nobody's at home?
Grace is a.
So what's she gonna do?
She gets.
Hey, you.
Hey, how
How
are
are
you?
you? Nice to see you.
You do, always.
She decided a couple years back she could be a lawyer anytime. One of those be a lawyer when she having procedures for high level horse credit. She works her. Like, how does that a little bit disgusting. But
She got the horse all tied up.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to start in about 1 minute. There's your 1-minute warning.
next week I'm off to DC.
Yeah, going on June.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
Take
Good
care
to
of
see you.
yourself.
You too.
All right. I have mints. Do you want one?
Sure. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. They're curiously strong. Megan, you want a mint? Oh.
Doing okay?
Yeah. beat seal.
All right.
Howdy.
We are missing one council member. Hopefully she'll be back shortly. It is 9:48. Oh, thank you. I do have mints. Thank you. Is there chocolate in there?
There sure is.
Yeah, bring it on. Thank you. Since we're waiting on Councilmember Papa.
I am participating in the chocolate for breakfast by having
Yes.
milk duds. It's 6:48 in the morning for me.
You're pretty tough, Madam Mayor.
Good sport.
I usually look like that at 6 in the morning too, just in case anybody.
I slept in my clothes.
All right, Councilmember Papajohn is hopefully coming back momentarily. If not, can we? Yes, okay, thank you, Councilmember Papajohn. We are beginning. All right. We are moving now on to item 11B. Oh, no, correction, 11C, for the public hearing and adoption of a resolution approving the City of Burlingame master fee schedule for fiscal year 24-25 and adoption of a resolution updating the user fee cost recovery policy for the city. So we'll turn this over to our finance director again.
Good evening, Mayor and Council member. Each year, the city approve the master fee schedule as part of a budget process. Staff review update fee on annual basis. This year, the city engaged Matrix Consulting Group perform a comprehensive user fee study to make sure the city's fee to reflect current cost to provide such services. At the April 15 meeting, the City Council approved a resolution to declare the intention to hold tonight public hearing to update the city's master fee schedule. Tonight, the City Council is asked to conduct public hearing and approve master fee schedule for fiscal year 24-25. This concludes my staff report. I'm here to answer any question you may have. We also have our consultant online from Matrix in case you have any questions. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Director. Colleagues, do we have questions for staff on this item? And we did have a pretty robust discussion a couple weeks ago. Seeing no questions, Madam, I don't see any hand up. I guess I continue to have one question. I've been, I asked this with staff and our consulting team, but the one lingering issue I have that maybe the consultant team can help me better understand. I know we calibrated the fees, particularly in the building area. But I look at where the building fees are currently and where they're going for the smaller projects. And things like a project that costs between up to $500, the base building permit went from $37 to $200 on a project that's up to $500. I think where it gets to be also a little complicated is when there's a $2,000 to $25,000 project and the base fee went from $116 to nearly $900, $884. Plus there's incremental dollar amounts based on how many thousands of dollars were over above 2,000. So as I recall, the consulting team sort of recalibrated to spread out the cost recovery among all the different size projects, but I am worried about an 8 or 9 time increase on the smaller projects, that an undue burden is happening to the smaller projects, which is going to create disincentives for people to actually get the permits that could keep health and safety and just to create more fairness for the lower dollar value projects. So I'd just like to understand from the consulting team, can we address that? Is there a way to tweak those lower projects and maybe the higher dollar projects carry more of the burden, or how can I get my head around the fairness in that?
Yeah, I think, can you guys hear me? Okay, perfect. This is Kushbu Engel. I'm the one of the project managers on the study for the city. So the way the fees are set up is really based on the true cost that it takes for staff to provide that service. So we looked at, you know, what is the time that it takes for those different types of projects, and the way kind of originally the valuation structures were set up was traditionally this concept of that, you know, the smaller projects are going to be subsidized by the larger projects. But in the state of California, there are specific legal regulations that require for each fee line item to kind of pay for what it truly costs for that service. So something that's, you know, valued at $2,000, where, you know, it's looking at what is the true time that it takes to do those inspections. So when we're looking at it, you know, it's between 3 to 4 trips for something that's valued at $2,000. That's really what that fee is based off of. And the cost is based off of the cost of the fully burdened rate of the inspectors. And because the way valuation is set up, it's set up to be stacked. So if you subsidize the smaller projects, you have to subsidize the larger projects because they all add up to the next range. Otherwise, what happens is it creates a mathematical inconsistency, and someone ends up paying more than what the base fee is for the previous category. So that's why all the ranges have to be stacked up and set up that way. So you can choose, you still have the discretion to subsidize the smaller projects, but the understanding is that in theory, then you're going to be subsidizing all projects. So if you choose to subsidize, let's say by 50%, then that 50% subsidy has to apply to all categories. It can't just apply to the lower ranges and not to the higher ranges as well. So there is still that option to do that. But the kind of concept of what is also valued at $2,000 these days is it would be a very small project and would be very minimal type of activity. Most of the projects that the city is seeing are in the larger dollar valuation ranges. There's not a lot of projects falling in that smaller dollar value ranges. As we look at, I think there was less than 15 projects that were, less than $2,000 in the city's valuation based off of last year's permit data. So there's not a lot of projects that are coming in that are valued at that range. Really, the bulk of your activity is really happening in those larger dollar valuation ranges.
Yeah. Well, thank you for that explanation that the law tells us we have to get cost recovery equally among projects. So I think
Correct.
that's what I'm hearing is if we subsidize one, we have to subsidize all. And I can imagine there's not a lot of $2,000 projects, but there may be a lot of $20,000 projects, and still a $1,100 building permit on a $15,000 or $20,000 project is substantial. It goes against my fairness meter, but the law tells us that we have to treat them equally. So I guess the lesson here is that it's a good thing we're doing this cost recovery study to really understand what the cost of doing business is to actually produce these permits and do the proper inspections. So, okay, thank you. I'm sorry, I'm just processing it.
If I can ask a follow-up to your question, Vice Mayor, which is it okay? So you spoke of, if it's a 20% subsidy, everything has to get a 20% subsidy. What if you said the first $500 were on the city for any permit? So it's a flat rate, which would then have the obvious effect mathematically of depressing the ratio of fee to service. And I do share the Vice Mayor's concern that, you're in the 15 to 20 grand range. That's like a bathroom. That's like, and that's the kind of thing where people won't pull permits if they feel like the permit fee is bad and want them to.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a public interest in getting people to play by the rules, and it doesn't always get enforced. I mean, it's not easy to enforce if somebody just does work on the weekend. Like, no one really knows.
I'd love to hear the answer from the consultant. Like, what if we leaned into the first $500 for everybody is
right?
Like, does
that count?
Yeah. Does that meet the law, the standard of law?
I think if you subsidize that category, like the $100 to $500 range, you could, because that is just on its own as a flat range. The only issue that does create is if somebody comes in as a $501 permit, they're going to pay substantially more than if somebody comes in less than $500. So that's the reason why the structure is set up the way it's structured. Is it's meant to kind of keep that fairness of, everybody's kind of paying the new base is kind of set up off of the previous calculation. So again, you could subsidize that range, but there is that understanding that if somebody came in for a $700 permit, then they're going to be paying substantially more than a $500 permit, which then creates the larger issue of potentially lying about valuations of projects and other kind of concerns there.
If I may, and I know it's late, and so I don't want to drag this out. I wasn't suggesting that fees or permits under $500 be free. I was suggesting that any building permit of any size get the first $500 of cost, essentially granted to it by the city.
Sorry, let me just chime in here too. So I think this is a good approach. This is something that we've been concerned about as well. The only question we'd have for the permits that are $1 to $500 in value, their fee currently would calculate at $217.82. So for subsidizing $500, then there would be no fee
Right.
for those, which could be the choice. And then you would just basically apply a $500 subsidy to the
Everything else.
fee, not to the valuation. We're not knocking down the valuation. We're
Right.
applying it to the fee. So there would be a certain number of projects that the fee is free. And then once you get to the $2,001 to $25,000, that fee would become $384.23 instead of $8884.23.
I think we're on the same page. Yeah.
Like a $500. So, but
I think
that
the
does
only,
that cost the city money because it's staff time. That is, yeah.
And sorry to interrupt. And I do think Ms. Engel made a good point. You know, the reason that there is a fairly high fee for a low valuation project is that there is a disproportionate amount of staff time. She mentioned the inspections, and you still got to do 3 inspections for a small project. So that's where the cost comes from. But, you know, certainly there's part of this whole cost recovery policy is what is the city's policy. So if a policy is to subsidize the first $500, there would be a certain number. It sounds like there's not a lot of permits under $2,000. As Engel mentioned, maybe 15 or so. So maybe that's not a huge hit. But to those where it does apply, that is a big deal. So, you know, maybe in terms of equity, that might.
So I'm curious what colleagues think, but if we did, and not to belabor this, but we might want to look at the fiscal impact of this, and we still have time to deal with that. If we did maybe not take a vote on this, but then considered what the fiscal impact is to the city before we made that decision and had the consultants look at this. I see the mayor has their hand up, and then Councilmember Stevenson's next. Go ahead. We need the finance brain to help
Thank
us
you.
think this through.
Oh, no. I mean, I think you have to have the numbers on it before you agree to it because we just don't know what it's going to cost. And I can't make a decision without knowing that. As to whether people pull permits or not, my inclination is that there are some people who are just going to be true, like honest people who are going to come up and always pull their permits and are going to be part. And then there's just a lot of people who just do work and don't pull permits. And I'm not sure that the money is the objective. You know what I'm saying? I think some people just don't pull permits because they either don't know, they don't understand that the project needs a permit, they don't know it needs a permit, or they're just, you know, they just, most likely I think it's they just don't know. So I'm not sure this would solve your problem of that. Like, you know.
Thank you. Any other comments? Councilmember Stevenson?
I'm all for incentives for people to pull permits as much as possible. Making sure that there are elements that we're protecting the overall community for in that process. I think the financials, yeah, I can't really, you know, suggest a path forward without really knowing what that fiscal impact is, and whether or not that plays out. In other words, like if we had that incentive, first 500 and some things for free, would we all of a sudden get a lot more than 15 small project permits being applied for because you've just basically made it very easy. So I would be kind of open to evaluating that a little bit more.
Do we still have time if at the next meeting we came back with a financial analysis to legislate these with appropriate time before July 1st?
It's depend, for example, like a building or planning. Right now, actually, we're already late for July 1st effective. So we already pushed to July 5th, but it's at the council's directions if you want to push this.
Yeah. I would propose, I just think this kind of stuff, it's tempting to rush. We're late, we're tired, but this could matter to people. And on this, under $25,000 project. And if we can look at the financial analysis and just take that into consideration, maybe it's so astronomical that the city would be subsidizing, it's not worth it. But if it is, it just seems like for the rule followers who do pull the permits, it would be a reasonable thing to lean into, to not make them go up by 8 or 9 times. So maybe we could look at the financial analysis. That would be my thought. Do we have a second, or does anybody else want to make a motion and vote on this tonight? Yeah, Councilman.
I just want to say, Vice Mayor, I really agree with what you're saying, and I think it would, reducing the $500 for a flat rate would help incentivize those to pull permits who aren't, and be, less of a burden for the smaller projects. So I do agree.
We'll see the analysis. Madam Mayor, did you have a thought?
Yes, just 2 things. So with regard to this evening, I think we should try to go ahead and pass this as is, and we can always ask for a follow-up on this and make an amendment. I think it's not prudent to continue to defer the entire fee schedule and risk for some reason like not having a quorum or something. I think we should actually just pass it. And if you want to study this one particular example, I think Councilman Stevenson raises a really good point, which is like, if there are 500 people who are not pulling permits, but now because a permit is free, they go out and pull them. And now our staff has to do 500 more on-sites, and we don't get compensated for it. It's a little difficult to understand. So I think it might take more than just 2 weeks. And I know our staff has a lot of pressure on them right now doing the budget.
That's not an unreasonable request. So Madam Mayor, do I hear you making a motion then?
Yes, I'd like to make a motion to go ahead and approve the fee schedule as is, with the understanding that I will put that back on the agenda sometime in the next 3 to 6 months, maybe after summer break, but we will put it back on to look at that one particular situation for the possibility of an amendment.
Second.
And I'll just invite one little discussion on the motion. I hope it could be after our summer break so that it can be
Yes.
addressed pretty soon rather than 6 months down the line. So, yeah.
I guess what I said is after our summer break, between now and summer break and the end of the year.
Yeah. Okay. It's sooner rather than later would be great. I can go along with that as well. All right, roll call vote.
Councilmember Papajohn?
Yes.
Councilmember Brownrigg?
Yes.
Councilmember Stevenson?
Yep.
Vice Mayor Beach?
Yes.
Mayor Coulson?
Yes.
Okay. Motion passes unanimously, and thank you for entertaining further study on that one issue. Appreciate that. Okay, we are moving on to item 12, staff reports and communications. We have recommendations for future of the Parklet program beyond June 30th, 2024. Mr. Gardner, this is your night.
Here we go. This will be short, I promise. At least the presentation will. And that is not a reflection of the importance or lack of the parklets. It's more that this has been discussed a lot. As recently as December, the council did give preliminary recommendation or authorization to continue the program past June 30th in a new form that's meant to be more long-term and less focused on COVID response and more on outdoor dining. So next, please. We love outdoor dining. It's great here. The weather is great. We've got tons of restaurants. Just had lunch on the avenue today. It's really wonderful. So this is really meant to support outdoor dining, but at the same time, kind of balance it with all the other things that are important for successful downtowns and commercial districts. Next, please. So we have a great streetscape on Burlingame Avenue, and it was designed with outdoor dining in mind. So you can see all the different examples here, day and night, generally. And if you go to the next, well, hold on, just really quickly. So yeah, on the next one here, you could see there's really 2 zones for sidewalk dining. Now, this is obviously an older photo, pre-pandemic and pre-parklet, with a restaurant that's been replaced since then. But you could see tables are both up against the walls of the building, and then there's also a table and chair zone with a discrete change in the paving, so it's very clear where the tables and chairs go. Then you've got a nice wide pedestrian area in between. So Burlingame Avenue has really been designed for sidewalk dining, but sidewalk dining has also been a fixture on the side streets and, particularly up against the restaurants. And some restaurants have also taken it upon themselves to expand their outdoor dining, but within their envelope. So one of the photos on the prior slide did show one of these patios. So you see them on Grapevine, you see it on the sushi restaurant, you see it on the pizza restaurant. There's a number of examples. So we like it. Next. The direction we've been given, though, is to look at a program that transitions out of the COVID area emergency response. And it's important to, that the reason I'm mentioning how much we like the sidewalk dining is that this is a scaled down program from what the pilot program was during the COVID era. And it's really trying to balance different priorities, but still allow sidewalk dining as an amenity and as an economic development tool. The thing to really keep in mind with during COVID is restaurants had really no other options other than outdoor dining to do business. Retailers did have the option of, for the most part, operating. Everybody had to wear masks, but they could still operate indoors. Restaurants didn't have that ability, so that's why the parklets became as big as they have. With the public health emergency behind us, it's time to, at least the direction we received, is to look at something that's longer term and less focused on emergency response and more on the amenities that outdoor dining can provide. So the draft on-street parklet outdoor dining policy is something that has been put together. If you can go to the next slide, please. We've looked at a lot of examples from other cities that have transitioned to long-term programs. We've looked at Belmont, Campbell, Los Gatos, Walnut Creek, and Mountain View. And what you see in the draft policy document is a real mashup of everything that we've seen, but then also with the addition that we have Team Parklet. I think we've got some members here. We've had a couple of meetings, internal staff with every department represented for the purpose of making sure that these are the standards we want. They've been really vetted down to the width of the drainage for the gutter and the size of the addresses and all of that. So from staff's perspective, we feel very good about this proposal. We feel that it balances the needs of the sidewalk dining, but also addresses some of the concerns that have arisen with the pilot program as it is. I am not planning to go through all of the changes. It's in the staff report, but I can speak to it if you want. But next, please. Probably the most significant changes, and this is from the Walnut Creek standards, but it applies to almost all of the ones, is probably the most significant change is that parklets would be restricted to just the frontage of the business. So whereas during COVID, it was important to allow them to extend and get permission from their neighbors, and it was really a survival thing. At this point, the idea is to scale it back and really just have the parklet as an extension of the sidewalk in front of the restaurant, and then allow all of the other spaces to return to parking and visibility. So then you can also, so we've put in different safeguards similar to what you see here related to utilities, fire hydrants, all the kinds of things that in the haste of the pandemic, we sort of just looked the other way. But with a longer term program, you really want to be a little more deliberate. So that is all I have in this presentation. But as I mentioned, the staff report outlines the major changes from the current pilot program, and then it also explains the rationale, because we don't want to just say we're just changing it for the sake of whatever. We want it to be really clear to the public, and particularly those who operate parklets. Why are we making these changes? What's the objective? What's the intent? So hopefully that's helpful, but I am here for any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Gardner. Who has a question for our staff? We know there's a lot of discussion, both at the economic development subcommittee level, but also sounds like independently and internally with staff. No questions? I guess I'd like to pose two questions. Did staff put any thought into a sort of escalator for the monthly flat cleaning fee? Because it looks like it's just a flat cleaning fee of $265 that would be appropriate for longer term.
Yeah, I do think, I mean, that fee, I think we do still want to look at some of the fees. So we've left that part out for now. The cleaning fee, though, I feel that does reflect, kind of back to the conversations just had, that does reflect the true cost to the city of providing the cleaning around the parklets. And even with a different configuration, we don't expect that to change. It's the primary, and certainly Public Works folks can chime in as well, but a lot of it is the manual labor involved in clearing around the parklet for the street cleaning to come. So the crews come out early in the morning. They clean the debris around the edges of the parklets where the street sweeper would not be able to reach. That requires people to wake up early in the morning with brooms and just do it. And there's a cost. So that fee, again, with any fee, there's discussions of, you can identify what it costs the city and then is that the right fee? But that is what it costs the city to do that service.
I think, well, we'll talk about opinions afterwards. That's one that just caught me, that we want to make sure it continues to cover the cost. The final question I have is, could you talk to us about the pros and cons, the discussion at the staff level about kind of bullet number 1, new parklets where there was not already a parklet previously will not be permitted. And once a parklet's removed, it will not be allowed to be replaced. Intent to encourage businesses to use the sidewalk for outdoor dining rather than adding new parklet. Was there some discussion about whether or not we want to allow, I mean, I know we're reeling in this program, but do we like parklets enough to allow new parklets to come into being? And what was the thought process behind that recommendation?
Sure, yeah, and there are different thoughts on that. So the rationale behind that is, I think the concern is there's already a lot of parklets, and if there's more parklets, it may hasten the transition of our commercial districts to be more focused on restaurants and less on retail and services. The flip side of that is, is the existence of a parklet really driving that decision, or are there bigger decisions when somebody looks to open a store or a restaurant? So it's, I'm being kind of both sides of this, but I'm trying to represent the different objectives that we've heard from people, and the reason the draft does say no new parklets is to try to encourage other uses, but
Off the street, yeah.
Certainly something that can deliberate on.
Okay. Well, I look forward to that discussion with colleagues, but thank you for that. See, any other questions? Oh, I see Mayor Coulson has her question. And I know we have at least one public comment card.
Perfect. Okay. Yes. So just sort of following up on the Vice Mayor's question, we also were thinking in anticipation of we have like the new Wharton Park that's just opened, and we're going to have the new town square that's open. So there will be considerably more outdoor dining opportunities, maybe not right necessarily adjacent to a particular restaurant, but most of these restaurants have takeout options, and we're hoping people will gather on the square and create some vibrancy around that. And then I think to your sort of the secondary part of your question, the other option I think we'd also discussed was the possibility of not per se parklets that are attuned to a specific restaurant, but do we as a city down the road ever want to just allow outside parklet dining areas that are just, maybe on Howard or side streets that might be more opportunities for just outdoor green space. And I think what we had decided, we would like kind of file that in the file for now, but it wouldn't be off the table. We could look at it down the road.
Thank you, Madam.
So those are my first two. And then my other sort of question is that I think we have an extension. We have till June. We're like, originally we had a plan to have the parklets stay till I think the middle of June or the end of June. And then there would be, and now we're talking about we might extend. I think there are some parklets that probably will just go away. I guess I'd like to see a commitment from people. So if we do make an extension, allow some time to sort through all this, that there's not just the lingering of, I'm going to call them sort of, untended parklets, if you will. There's some that just have the orange borders. They aren't being maintained really, and they don't have anything pretty. I'm guessing most of those people are not going to reinvest in a big parklet. So how do we sort of transition and break it and get the ones that are committed and move forward? It's just something to think about.
Thank you. Yes, Councilmember Stevenson.
I saw the range of price points and things. I did a back of the envelope calculation a while back on the fact that this is quite positive for a lot of the restaurants because of the sheer number of tables they can now offer and compared to not paying their landlord rent, that it's pretty lucrative for them to have this. At the same time, I'm concerned that we don't really have the full recovery cost of what this is outside of just cleaning. I'm all for parklets in the sense of the outdoor dining, and I like that. I do agree with the mayor's comments that some of the design, we need to tighten that design. And I'm also concerned about some of the other businesses that are not restaurants that nobody can see driving by or even sometimes walking by until they're right upon the location. So those are kind of two areas that I would certainly welcome a little bit more thinking about what is the true cost of these, and are we, especially if we're limiting the size just to the storefront going forward.
Sure, and I think
Sorry, I thought my voice was pretty loud. Sorry.
Yeah, so the use fees are all over the place, and that's really a policy issue in that Campbell, for example, does not have a use fee at all because they really want parklets. They would like to energize their district. On the flip side, they also have probably the most stringent standards, and their parklets are not cheap to build, and they realize that. So that there's a lot of pieces. Walnut Creek is probably the top tier in terms of both having the highest use fee and also having as stringent standards as Campbell. So they really do kind of put a big premium on these. So a lot of it does, are you trying to capture the value or trying to capture the cost of the lost parking? Is it, it gets into the how do you want to set the price? Do you want to encourage it? Do you want to break even? Can't make money on something that's a fee, but we can at least look at what the full cost is, fully burdened.
Director Gardner, do you want to speak to any of the new design standards that are laid out, like to address some of those concerns in the draft?
Sure. So we did just mention, I think the removal of roofs is a significant one, and that may be a head scratcher for some people, but it is to provide more visibility to the surrounding businesses. The existing parklets, some of them are quite substantial, and with the roof structure, you don't really see around them. So the intent of removing the roofs and also restricting the height of the walls is to provide more of that cross visibility. We'd like the parklets, the water barriers to be, or water walls, to be covered on both sides. So we have a few examples of parklets that look great from the sidewalk, but then if you're driving down the street, it looks like a construction zone because these are construction barriers. So others examples here in town, they are covered on both sides. So there are local examples to point to. We do want, the drainage is really important, and there was reference earlier in the meeting to the big storm in the end of 2022. And how much of that was parklet versus anything else. But, our fear is that particularly if the gutters are blocked, you just don't get the drainage. So we don't know what's under a lot of these parklets. They were built so quickly. So we'd like them deconstructed so we can make sure that there are clear zones for drainage. They've been properly designed. Trying to think of what else. This is something we've talked to our colleagues in other cities, is the stacking and storage of furniture. We are suggesting that they not be stacked or allowed to remain. So if the business is closed, they get cleared out. There has been discussion. Some of the cities say you could leave them out for other people to use off after business hours. They found that they've had enforcement issues with that. So it may just be easier to enforce full clearance at night, which is kind of how the sidewalk dining works as well. You see the tables come in and out, and they could be stacked indoors. So that's another change. One thing that could help with cost is we are suggesting changing the inspections from quarterly to annually. We talked to particularly the departments that do the inspections, and that includes fire, public works, and building. They feel annually is perfectly sufficient. If there are issues, they get called out anyway. So, but if there's not an issue, it seems kind of silly to do 4 inspections a year when everything's going fine. So that would lower the inspection costs. I think if there's anything else,
Yep.
those are kind of the big item.
All right. Well, without any further questions from staff, we're going to open it up to public comment so we can consider that as we deliberate and give some direction on this draft plan. We're not legislating anything tonight, but we want to make sure we have some direction from staff. So I have the first public comment card is from Mr. David Mendel of Kearns Jewelers. Thank you for being with us tonight and for sticking around so late.
Good evening and good morning, wherever you are. Thank you very much for this. Thank you for all the comments. A lot of that addressed. I totally agree with a lot that was said. I totally disagree with a lot that was said as well, of course. I'm always Mr. Parking, I know, so that's always one thing. I'll just throw that out there. Parking's important. But I really appreciate what you said about the drainage and everything. I had brought some pictures. I know you talked about the big flood in December. This was the small flood just this Saturday with a lake on Lorton that covers up onto the sidewalk as well, that I kind of brought us some samples. And so that's super, super important. I also appreciate when you talk about cost recovery on them. I think it's also important to consider tax revenue as part of that cost recovery, because customers are important and vital to us. For us, we're in a lucky position where sometimes when somebody drives around for 20 minutes and can't find parking, they can kind of reschedule. For people with a hair salon, things like that, I mean, they don't have that opportunity, and parking is just so vital and important. I really, really, really don't understand continuing it on Burlingame Avenue. I think that the sidewalk was specifically built wide enough to accommodate for tables. I know it's kind of outside our area, we're a block away, but especially on the avenue, it just doesn't make sense to me to take more parking spaces, which are already hard to get into when it switched to parallel. It doesn't make sense that there's additional space on top of that. It's almost like double dipping into the system. So I think that especially on the avenue, I don't see the need for parklets there. Sorry about this. I know it was a temporary thing at the beginning of the pandemic, and I know it was vital to help support businesses in the community. Nowadays, thank God it's not vital anymore. It's a luxury. It's great. More and more restaurants are specifically building outdoor space within their line, and that's great because they know people want it. But to have it just open and public space, it just doesn't make sense anymore. I mean, it's a great luxury, but it's not necessary, and there's so many other things that the city needs to consider. I remember pre-pandemic going into Palo Alto, some places had temporary parklets that were brought in just seasonally when the weather was good, and they came in for a short amount of time and left. I know the Creamery had that, and I thought it was kind of a cool thing back pre-pandemic. Maybe that's an answer so that at least the rest of the year, that space that's not used so much in the rainy season can still be used. And that's all I have. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your comments. Thanks for always engaging, Mr. Mendel. Any other members of the public would like to speak? Everybody gets 3 minutes. And we welcome your thoughts.
Hello. Good evening.
Honorable Vice Mayor, Mayor remotely, members of the council. My name's Don Gross, also a retail owner on Burlingame Ave. And I'm here to support what I would actually, my overwhelming response from my clients that come into the store, hundreds of them a month, would all agree that these parklets should be removed permanently for the very same reasons that I heard from the previous gentleman. It was pre-pandemic. The sidewalks were built for bistro tables, and that's a cool thing. And it's just got out of control, but mainly for the parking. And I'm looking at the staff report, which is really, really good. And it covers 10 points on there, not to belabor all of them, but on a daily basis, I look out my window and I see at least one or two children and a couple of senior citizens that almost get picked off in between these parklets. And that's one of the reasons why you have to lower the sight line, right? That makes a lot of sense. And some of these parklets are so close together that there's a spot for a car to actually parallel park in there. And I don't know how they can even see what's going on. And I can't believe I haven't seen more accidents, but a couple of near misses. And it's become kind of a running, like mystery of what's going to happen with these parklets. And I can tell you during the rainy season here, it's been crazy. When I first bought the business, the street cleaners would come through, and now there's absolutely no way they can get in between the parklets. So that I can definitely notice a difference on the streets. So I guess in summary, the overall consensus I'm hearing is that these should be eliminated. At the very least, put these restrictions on here make a lot of sense. And if it's a temporary thing, then maybe the following year it might be removed permanently. But I'd have full consideration for either of those options. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Gross. Other members of the public wish to participate in the conversation? Come on up.
So my name's Allison Farrell. I'm owner of Paper Caper, so I'm right up the street from some of our neighbors and can just want to piggyback on a lot of what they said, because it is very true. The parking on a daily basis, and it saddens me because I tell our community and our customers to come here and share their thoughts, and unfortunately I don't see any, but it is the number one complaint we get on a daily basis. And we are unbelievably fortunate that we have a private back parking lot, but the congestion for them to navigate the avenue, there's so many more cars and people concentrated. It's just not a welcoming place. And I definitely think in the last 6-8 months, we're definitely seeing foot traffic outside of holiday seasons. Foot traffic is not the same because people are not finding it a great place to come. It's not easy to come. And the congestion of some of these parklets that do exist and some of the territory that they cover and the congestion on the sidewalks, it's just not a pleasurable place for people to be coming. And we're doing everything to reassure them that this is going to get fixed. And I think I've heard a lot of great ideas and things that solve a lot of the problems. But I do think something that was meant to be a temporary solution to help our neighbors has done its job, and to help bring some attention and balance to us, the retailers that don't have the food service, that aren't building things to extend our business. It would be something to really consider. So thank you for your time.
Thank you for your comments. Anyone else?
We do also have emails.
Okay, yes, so we'll turn it over to the city clerk. And if anybody in the audience wants to speak after, just please make your way up to the podium now so we'll know. Thank you.
We have an email from Dimitri. He says, I and my family have been longtime residents of Burlingame. I've been a proponent of the downtown space and for making it more of a pedestrian environment. Years ago, I proposed closing the street and making the space similar to Santana Row in San Jose. That area is tremendously inviting area. I know the city recently did an experiment of closing the street to cars and the result was not positive. However, I strongly believe the people who frequent the area did not have enough time to get accustomed to the closure, and the merchants could not really develop a strategy for it because it was temporary. Just like it took time for people to get used to the idea of California becoming narrower, people need to get used to the idea of the Ave being pedestrian. If the pavement is brought up to be even with the sidewalks and the merchants have had a chance to develop a strategy for the area, I believe it will be a fantastic space. Long ago, when I suggested the idea of closure, one of the pushbacks was that customers want to park close to the merchants. Since the expansion of the sidewalks, the number of parking spaces has already dropped by a significant percentage, and the notion of getting any parking space on Burlingame Ave, let alone one close to your target merchant, is not reasonable. I believe people are used to the idea that you won't park on the Ave often. Also, in years past, there was more retail shops, whereas the market has evolved to be more eateries. These eateries can benefit from additional seating, especially outdoors. I know this point is not directly related to parklets. I can see the demand for parklets continuing, but I think the city should take a broader look at this idea of outdoor dining and consider making the Ave pedestrian only. Our next email comes from Lath. He says, I'm writing you today to voice my strong support for a long-term permanent parklet program for Burlingame Ave. The parklets have been a huge success in creating a bustling, vibrant street with lots of activity and foot traffic that all merchants benefit from. In fact, the street has never been more lively, and I believe that this is a large result of the parklets. Restaurant goers love outdoor dining. However, the current temporary program has resulted in a hodgepodge of parklet solutions with no cohesiveness and no integration to our very costly and beautiful Burlingame Avenue street improvement that we completed a few years ago. I encourage you all to look to Los Gatos as a model of what potentially there is for a permanent parklet program. They succeeded in creating something beautiful and have thought through many issues that we face currently. What is most beneficial about a more permanent program is that the city can create design standards that would be at par with the design standards of our street improvement program. Currently, many of the temporary parklets are unsightly, and they often look like construction sites with bright orange traffic barriers along the street perimeter of the parklet. Additionally, if restaurant owners know and trust that the parklets will be more permanent, then they will invest in making the parklets beautiful extensions of their restaurants. I believe it would be mutually beneficial for the city to partially subsidize the parklets, again modeled after the Los Gatos program. The Los Gatos program also specifies that the restaurants have exclusive use of the parklets during business hours, but the parklets become available for public use afterwards. This benefits the public by expanding the heavily trafficked and often crowded sidewalk. People can use the parklets to enjoy ice cream or coffee or simply gather and talk. I think this portion of the Los Gatos program is worth adopting. From an aesthetic point of view, anything would be better than what we have now. Please consider adopting a permanent program that enhances and adds to our amazing and beautiful street improvement project. Our next email is from Doug Bojack. He says, I'm writing to express my strong support of the preservation of vibrant restaurant parklets in our city. These outdoor dining spaces have become integral to the charm of Burlingame, providing residents and visitors alike with enjoyable outdoor dining options while fostering a sense of community. As you deliberate on the future of these parklets, I urge you to consider the significant benefits they offer and the importance of allowing their continued existence as fixtures of the commercial landscape. First and foremost, I believe that permanent shelters are superior to shade umbrellas when it comes to addressing the of heat. While shade umbrellas may provide temporary relief from the sun rays, they often fall short in providing adequate protection during extreme heat waves or inclement weather conditions. In contrast, permanent shelters offer consistent coverage and shelter, ensuring that patrons can enjoy outdoor dining comfortably throughout the year. By allowing businesses to invest in more permanent shelters for restaurant parklets, the city can demonstrate its commitment to promoting outdoor dining experiences that are both enjoyable and adaptable to rising heat effects. On a related note, I urge the council not to force the removal of existing parklets during the peak of summer. As temperatures rise and residents seek refuge from the heat, outdoor dining becomes more important than ever. Removing parklets during this critical time would not only disrupt the operations of local businesses, but also deprive residents of valuable outdoor dining options where few establishments would be. Instead, I encourage staff to work collaboratively with restaurant owners to implement measures that preserve the integrity of our public spaces and still permit a built environment that benefits residents. I believe that preserving restaurant parklets is essential for maintaining the vitality and charm of the city. By investing in more permanent shelters, allowing new or replacement parklets, and avoiding unnecessary removal during the summer months, the city demonstrates its commitment to supporting local businesses. I urge the council to prioritize the preservation of restaurant parklets and consider the long-term benefits they offer to our community.
Thank you, Madam City Clerk. Okay, seeing no further public comment, we'll close public comment and we'll deliberate and provide some direction. And I just, oh, sorry.
Sorry.
Thank you.
Through the Vice Mayor, just one thing I've left out, which is very important, is the logistics of the existing program expiring on June 30th. And should there be a longer term program, the mechanics of the council would need to authorize an extension. The staff has kind of talked about how that would work, but that authorization would need to come from the council. The mayor had mentioned one suggestion, which is, maybe parklets commit by June 30th, and then those that have committed get the extension, and anyone else needs to pull up. But that's one suggestion. But in any case, we do want to get that kind of direction as well.
Thank you, Mr. Gardner. Okay, it's very late, so I would just ask colleagues to be succinct in our comments and offer some thoughts for consideration. Anybody want to start? Go ahead.
I'll go quick, which is I've been on the economic subcommittee, so I heard a lot of testimony from both sides. I fully endorse this approach. I think, although with this, there are some exceptions, by and large, the parklets that exist are the people who struggled through COVID. And if we let this go any longer where you can create new ones, then it really does become very arbitrary and unfair. Like, well, why did that new one get it and I didn't? So right now it's more or less everybody who was here through COVID. I think once they're done, I happen to agree with the point of view that we created wide sidewalks at some significant cost to allow for outdoor dining. So it's a very tough thing, and I've enjoyed a lot of parklets. So, anyway, that's my 2 cents.
Anybody else would like to go next? Councilmember Stevenson, sure.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. I agree with Councilmember Brownrigg. I think we need to get a commit, and if they don't, then we're not looking to continue beyond the current program for that particular location. I am for the design specs. I think part of the challenge is we invested in the sidewalks. Alfresco dining is a big part of any major city that you go around. And there's lots of opportunities to enjoy that without the parklets. But I would like to see the design be more balanced for retailers. I think if you look at some of the businesses, they have almost triple the door front space that they have. That makes it difficult, and I'm certainly concerned about safety because I know, in that crowded space, that's a real challenge.
Thank you, Councilmember Stevenson. Oh, go ahead.
I'll make a quick comment.
Yep.
I haven't been involved in this very long, but I do really agree that there should be a standard, and I agree with the points that were made in the staff report. And yeah, like there are 30 parklets now, so we could get commitments from them whether they want to continue or not, and I think that would be a good resolution.
Thank you, Councilmember Papajohn. Oh, Madam Mayor, do you want to go next or last?
I would, sure, go ahead, Vice Mayor, and then I'll wrap it up.
No, I think great conversation. I want to make sure that we are recovering full costs for cleaning. I think that's really important, and that as it increases, we need to do that. Reasonable people can disagree. I really like the parklet program. I think it adds to the vibrancy. It adds to the feeling of community. I think I would like to see it. My preference would be to implement every standard here, but allow for new parklets that meet the new standard to come into play and to even expand them if retailers want them, or if we wanted to create some green space with them. And as other cities have done, I like to lean into them. I think they add a lot of value, and I think reasonable people can disagree, but I hear a lot of people that love them. And, I think the sidewalks are still full, and people can dine. But, so I'd be interested if there's anybody else that would consider that. My one other comment is, as we do remove, because clearly we're going to have fewer parklets with the new standards. It's just, laws require distance from corners. There's going to be fewer parklets. I hope that we take those water barriers and that we purchased during the pandemic and let us repurpose them into quick build opportunities to create impromptu protected bike lanes to try things in creative new spaces where maybe we couldn't afford to build the infrastructure to really protect people on key routes, particularly on ways to schools, and really get creative with that quick build infrastructure. That's my one wish list on the barriers. Madam Mayor, go ahead.
Thank you. So I appreciate all the staff's time and staff work on this. I think if Public Works had their way and staff had their way, it would be easiest to remove these for a lot of reasons, from liability to just the massive amount of work it puts on our staff, which precludes them from doing other things. I like the program. I'm willing to go along with this program as it stands. I am concerned about proliferation. When you talk to the retailer or the property owners, they'll tell you the pressure to just put more and more restaurants in is just enormous. And they all want a parklet. And the problem I have with that is pretty soon you have a street that has nothing open during the day and restaurants that open at 5 o'clock at night, and we become a food court. And I really just think as Mr. Mendel and Mr. Gross and our friends at Paper Caper all note, there is an enormous contribution that our hard goods retailers make to the city in terms of sales tax. Enormous. And I don't want to jeopardize our balance of hard businesses with restaurants, which are also fun, but are frankly destroying the avenue right in front of the restaurants. It's pitch black, it's filthy dirty. They're not covering the cost. We can't keep it clean. And so I think it's just a matter of balancing it. I do think the rooftops need to come down because I think the sight lines for pedestrians is, as you know, now not legal. It is no longer illegal to jaywalk. So I know people are walking across the avenue. So keeping the roofs down will keep the sight lines for pedestrians safer, for parking safer, and for the retailers to be able to have their beautiful windows show the gorgeous Margaret's group, Director Glomsted's group is just doing amazing hanging flower pots. They look so beautiful right now, and you can't see them because they're hid behind the parklets. So I think for all those reasons, I'm inclined to go with this, sort of the staff's recommendation. I think we should get a commitment by June 30th with a hard money down payment, non-refundable deposit. And for anyone who is just not interested in keeping their parklet, I think we can remove them for the summer and give the parking spaces back.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So I'm hearing, at least it seems like a majority consensus to provide guidance for the staff report sort of as proposed, unless there's anybody else that wants to advocate for any changes to it. Okay, seeing that, and then is everybody in agreement with the mayor's suggestion about getting hard commitments by June 30th? Reasonable? Okay. Is there any other further decision making we need to provide at this point? Any other questions? Yes, Councilmember Stevenson.
Is those hard commitments have to be against the proposed design standards? They cannot be against what they currently have. Just, that has to be very clear to them.
Do they have to, and then let's see if there's any further clarification you need from us.
Madam Vice Mayor, should the parklet owners decide to stay with the program, continue with the new program, we do need to give them some time to upgrade new parklet. So we want to ask council's preference. Would 3 months time would be adequate, or less time, or how do you feel about that?
What's reasonable? Because they're pretty significant improvements. I mean, it requires contractor design and.
It does. Yeah. It requires review, approval, and all that.
Yeah.
Staff feels about 4 months of time would be at least 4 months, if not 4 months would be what I think. I haven't checked with staff, with other staff members, but I think 4 months would be a reasonable time. And that would allow them to to submit the plans and get approvals from building, public works, and fire. That'd be okay.
It also gets you past the summer, so they get the warm months to have what they have. But the ones who aren't going to continue will not get to do that, right?
Yep. So that would be through the end of October, basically, we're saying. They need to commit if they're going to do it by July 1st. Is that reasonable, or do they need more time to commit
They're going
the
to,
financial analysis? They'll know. Okay.
they're going to presumably make a decision before June 30th.
Okay.
Then continue or not.
Okay.
So I think that provides plenty of time. It gets us past Fall Fest. It gets us past Burlingame on the Avenue,
The change in the weather.
change in the weather, all of that. And then, we're done.
Does
Or
sound-
not done, and people who are going to make the changes, make the change.
Sound reasonable?
Yeah.
Okay.
Mhm.
Any further direction needed? Thanks to staff for their hard work on them. Okay, and thank you for members of the public for sticking around for the conversation and contributing your valuable input. Item number 13, council committee and activities, reports and announcements, unless there's something super urgent. Seeing none. Future agenda items. Yes.
Just from
Councilmember
Mayor.
Duncan.
Thank you. Yeah, just, when we had our study session earlier, I just wanted to suggest a discussion for a future agenda item for micromobility devices, motorized micromobility devices, and regulation of them.
Yes, thank you for the issue that was brought up during the Traffic Safety Parking Commission for micromobility, like electric bikes and such any micromobility device.
Right, correct.
Okay. Is there somebody who would like to second that? Yeah, and I think there's a lot of head nods. We heard the mayor
Yeah.
had some comments, and I fully support it as well. Thank you for that. With that, do we have any other acknowledgements? Seeing none, thank you for your participation. Adjourned at 10:50 p.m. Adios.